broken ground. Caleb Harlan stood in his cellar doorway with a loaded rifle, staring at the girl crouched between his grain sacks like a cornered animal. She was barefoot, hollow-eyed, clutching a bruised apple she hadn't yet bitten. Dust streaked her face, blood darkened the hem of her dress. When he demanded to know who she was, she didn't beg or run. She met his eyes with something worse than fear, acceptance. "My parents died today," she said, voice flat as Kansas winter. "I just wanted food." The rifle lowered, the girl stayed kneeling. And Caleb Harlan, who hadn't spoken more than 10 words a day in 3 years, realized silence wasn't going to be enough anymore. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop a comment with your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it moves you, hit that like button. Now let's begin. The high plains of Wyoming Territory had a way of making ghosts out of living men. Caleb Harlan knew that better than most. 3 years since fever took his wife, Mary. 2 years since he'd stopped setting a second plate at the table. 1 year since he'd last spoken her name aloud. The ranch still stood, fence posts crooked, barn paint peeling, but standing. 30 head of cattle grazed the western pasture. Chickens scratched in the yard. The well hadn't run dry. By the standards of men who measured success in survival, Caleb was doing fine. By any other standard, he was hollow. He woke before dawn most days, worked until his hands bled, ate standing over the stove, and fell asleep in the chair by the fire because the bed still smelled like lavender soap and loss. He didn't drink, didn't curse, didn't pray. He simply endured, one day collapsing into the next like fence rails in a windstorm. September came in hot and mean. The drought had stretched into its second year, turning the grass brittle and the creek to a trickle. Dust hung in the air like a threat. Caleb spent the morning reinforcing the water troughs, then rode out to check the southern fence line where coyotes had been testing the wire. He returned just after sunset, boots heavy with exhaustion, and went straight to the cellar for a jar of preserved tomatoes. Mary's work. The last of it. The cellar door was unlatched. Caleb froze. He'd locked it that morning. He always locked it. Supplies were too precious to risk, and drifters passed through often enough that carelessness could cost a man everything he had. He stepped back, listened, heard nothing. Then, a soft scrape. Movement against wood. Caleb fetched the rifle from inside the kitchen, loaded it with hands that hadn't shaken in years, and returned to the cellar. He pulled the door wide, letting the last of the daylight spill down the wooden steps. At the bottom, wedged between 2 grain sacks, was a girl. Not a woman. A girl. Maybe 17, maybe 20. Hard to say beneath the grime and exhaustion. Her dark hair hung loose and tangled. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, hem black with dried mud or blood. Her feet were bare, filthy, blistered. She clutched an apple in both hands, holding it like something sacred, though she hadn't taken a bite. She looked up at him with eyes that had already seen too much. "Don't move," Caleb said, rifle leveled. She didn't. "Who are you?" Silence. "I asked you a question." The girl's throat worked. Her voice came out low and ragged, like she hadn't used it in days. "Lena Crow." "What are you doing in my cellar, Miss Crow?" "I was hungry." "So you thought you'd help yourself?" "Yes." The honesty startled him. No excuses, no tears, just a flat admission of theft. Caleb's finger hovered near the trigger, but something in her stillness made him hesitate. She wasn't looking at the rifle. She was looking at him, waiting for judgment the way a woman might wait for a sentencing. "Where are you from?" he asked. 15 miles east, the Crow homestead. Caleb knew the name, vaguely. A struggling farm, thin soil, bad luck. He'd never met the family. "Your folks know where you are?" Her expression didn't change. "My parents died today." The words landed like stones in still water. Caleb lowered the rifle an inch. "Today?" "This morning." "Both of them?" "Yes." He studied her face, looking for the lie, the con, the angle. Found nothing but exhaustion and truth. "How'd they die?" Lena's jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" "It does if you're sitting in my cellar stealing my food." She looked down at the apple, then back at him. "Fever took my mother 2 days ago. My father, Her voice wavered, steadied. He couldn't live with it. Caleb understood before she said it. The weight in her words, the flatness, suicide. The girl, Lena, had found her father dead and come here because there was nowhere else to go. He should have sent her away, should have pointed her toward town, toward the church, toward anyone with more charity than sense. But something in the set of her shoulders, the way she didn't beg or grovel, stopped him. "You bury them?" he asked. "Yes." "By yourself?" "Yes." Caleb exhaled slowly, then lowered the rifle completely. "Come on up." Lena blinked. "What?" "I said come up. You look half dead, and I'm not having that on my conscience." She stood slowly, unsteady on her blistered feet, and climbed the cellar steps with the apple still clutched in one hand. When she reached the top, Caleb stepped aside and gestured toward the house. "Kitchen's through there. Sit down before you fall down." Lena sat at the table like she didn't trust the chair to hold her. Caleb filled a tin cup with water from the pitcher and set it in front of her. She drank it in 4 long swallows, then set the cup down carefully, as if afraid it might break. He lit the stove, put coffee on to boil, and sliced bread from the loaf he'd baked 2 days prior. He added butter, a spoonful of jam, and set the plate in front of her. "Eat," he said. She ate. Not quickly, not greedily, but thoroughly, chewing each bite like it mattered, like she was trying to remember what food tasted like. Caleb poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter, watching her in the dim light. Up close, he could see the bruises on her arms, the cut above her eyebrow, the way her hands trembled slightly when she reached for the cup. "You hurt?" he asked. "Not much." "That's not an answer." "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." Lena met his gaze. "I'm alive. That's fine enough." Caleb didn't argue. He knew what that kind of fine meant. When she finished eating, he refilled her cup and sat down across from her. The kitchen felt strange with another person in it. Too small. Too loud. He hadn't shared a table with anyone since Mary died. "What were you planning to do?" he asked, "after you took the apple?" "Keep walking." "To where?" "Anywhere that wasn't there. Town's 8 miles north, you know that?" "Yes, but you came here instead." "I didn't want to see people." Caleb understood that too. He studied her for a long moment, weighing options he didn't want to consider. He could give her a few supplies, point her toward town, and forget he'd ever seen her. Clean, simple, safe. But she'd buried both her parents in one day and walked 15 miles barefoot just to steal an apple she hadn't eaten. "You can stay the night," he said. "Barn's got a loft. It's dry." Lena's eyes widened slightly. "Why?" "Because you look like you're about to collapse, and I'm not sending you back out there in the dark." "I don't need charity." "Didn't offer charity. Offered a place to sleep. You can leave in the morning if you want." She hesitated, then nodded once. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet, but..." Caleb led her to the barn, carrying a lantern and a wool blanket. The loft smelled like hay and old leather. He set the blanket down, checked that the roof wasn't leaking, and pointed to a bucket in the corner. "Water's there if you need it. Outhouse is behind the barn." Lena climbed the ladder slowly, favoring her left ankle. When she reached the top, she turned and looked down at him. "Mr. Harlan?" "Caleb." "Caleb," she corrected. "Why are you helping me?" He thought about that. About Mary. About the year he'd spent wishing someone had helped him when grief was eating him alive. "Because someone should have," he said. Then he left her there and walked back to the house, where the silence waited like it always did. Lena was gone when Caleb woke the next morning. He told himself it was better that way. Simpler. One less complication in a life that didn't need complications. But when he went to the barn to feed the horses, he found her in the chicken coop, gathering eggs. She looked up when he approached, dirt smudged on her cheek, hair tied back with a piece of twine. "They weren't laying much," she said. "I moved the nesting boxes to the shaded side. Should help." Caleb stared at her. "Thought you'd be gone." "Thought about it." "What changed your mind?" Lena straightened, holding the egg basket against her hip. "You gave me food and a place to sleep. Least I can do is work for it." "I didn't ask you to work." "I'm not asking permission." There was steel beneath the exhaustion now. something that hadn't been there last night. Caleb considered sending her away, considered all the reasons it was a bad idea to let a stranger stay. Then he looked at the chickens, already settling into their relocated nests, and the eggs she'd gathered without being asked. "You know anything about ranching?" he asked. "Enough." "Cooking?" "Enough." "Can you follow instructions without arguing?" Lena's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Probably not." Despite himself, Caleb felt something crack in his chest, something that might have been the beginning of a laugh if he remembered how. "Fine," he said. "You can stay. 1 week. You work, you eat, you sleep in the loft. After that, we'll see." "I don't need charity," Caleb finished. "You said, this isn't charity, it's a deal. You help me keep this place running, I give you a roof and food, that's it." Lena studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Deal." She held out her hand. Caleb shook it. Her grip was stronger than he expected. "Otam." The first 3 days passed in silence and work. Lena rose before dawn, fed the chickens, hauled water, mended fence wire, and mucked stalls without complaint. She moved through tasks with quiet efficiency, never asking for direction, never waiting for praise. She worked like someone who'd learned early that survival meant usefulness. Caleb watched her the way he'd watch a new horse, cautious, assessing, waiting for the stumble. But she didn't stumble. She adapted. When the pump handle stuck, she fixed it. When the barn door sagged, she rehung it. When he came in from the north pasture with a gashed forearm from barbed wire, she cleaned and wrapped it without flinching. "You've done this before," he said, watching her tie off the bandage. "My mother taught me." It was the first time she'd mentioned her family since that first night. Caleb wanted to ask more, wanted to know what kind of parents raised a girl who could bury them both and keep walking, but the look in her eyes told him the subject was closed, so he let it be. On the 4th day, Lena rode into town with him. She didn't ask to come. She simply saddled Mary's old mare, a gentle bay named Clover, and waited by the gate until Caleb rode up. "You don't have to come," he said. "I know." "Town folks can be—" "I know," she said again. Caleb studied her face, saw the set of her jaw, and decided not to argue. They rode in silence. The town of Bitter Creek, Wyoming, wasn't much to speak of. A main street lined with false-fronted buildings. A general store. A saloon. A church with a crooked steeple. 200 souls, give or take, most of them ranchers or their families. Caleb tied the horses outside the general store and went in. Lena followed. The store smelled like coffee and tobacco and old wood. Shelves lined the walls stocked with canned goods, fabric, tools, and ammunition. Behind the counter stood Walter Briggs, a barrel-chested man with a salt and pepper beard and sharp eyes. "Caleb," Walter said, nodding. Then his gaze shifted to Lena, and his expression cooled. "Who's this?" "Lena Crow," Caleb said. "She's working my ranch." Walter's eyebrows rose. "Crow? You related to the folks out east?" "They were my parents," Lena said quietly. "Were?" "They died last week." Walter's face shifted, surprise, then suspicion. "Both of them?" "Yes." "How?" Lena's expression didn't change. "Fever and grief." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Walter looked at Caleb. "You know what you're doing, bringing her here?" "I know what I'm doing," Caleb said evenly. "Folks are going to talk." "Let them." Walter grunted, then turned to pull supplies from the shelves: flour, sugar, salt, coffee. He worked in silence, mouth pressed into a thin line. Lena stood near the door, hands clasped in front of her, eyes fixed on the floor. She looked small in the dusty light, smaller than she'd looked in the barn, smaller than she'd looked gathering eggs. Caleb paid, loaded the supplies into the saddlebags, and led the way back outside. As they mounted their horses, a woman's voice cut across the street. "Well, I'll be." Caleb turned. Margaret Cole stood on the boardwalk, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. She was a thin, sharp-faced woman who ran the boarding house and considered herself the town's moral authority. "Caleb Harlan," she said, voice dripping with disapproval. "You taking in strays now?" "Just hired help, Margaret." "Hired help?" Margaret's gaze raked over Lena. That what they're calling it? Caleb's jaw tightened. Careful, Margaret. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. A young girl living alone with a widower doesn't look right. Then don't look, Caleb said. He clicked his tongue, and his horse moved forward. Lena followed. Behind them, Margaret's voice rang out. Mark my words, Caleb Harlan. This won't end well. They rode back in silence. When they reached the ranch, Lena dismounted, unsaddled Clover, and brushed her down without a word. Caleb watched from the barn entrance, arms crossed. You all right? He asked. Fine. Margaret's got a mouth on her, but she's all bark. I know. Most folks aren't like that. Lena looked at him then, and her expression was tired. So tired. Yes, they are, she said quietly. They just hide it better. She hung the brush on its peg and walked to the house. Caleb stood there watching her go and realized she was probably right. Bersam. That night, Lena cooked supper. Caleb hadn't asked her to, hadn't expected it, but when he came in from checking the cattle, the stove was lit, and the smell of fried potatoes and bacon filled the kitchen. Lena stood at the counter, slicing bread, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled to her elbows. She moved with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything else. Didn't have to do this, Caleb said. You didn't have to let me stay, Lena replied. Fair point. They ate together at the table. The food was simple but good, better than anything Caleb had made in months. You're a good cook, he said. My mother taught me. Another mention, another crack in the wall. Caleb chewed slowly, considering his next words. You want to talk about it? No? All right. They finished the meal in silence. Lena washed the dishes, Caleb dried them. It felt strange and familiar all at once, like stepping into a memory that didn't belong to him. When the kitchen was clean, Lena wiped her hands on a towel and turned to face him. Caleb? Yeah? What Margaret said today. About people talking. Is that going to be a problem? Caleb hung the towel on its hook. For who? For you. I stopped caring what people thought a long time ago. But they'll talk anyway. Let them. Lena studied him, searching for something. Why are you doing this? Really? Caleb leaned against the counter, arms crossed. He thought about Mary, about the year after she died, when neighbors brought casseroles and sympathy and left him more alone than ever, about the silence that had nearly killed him. Because you needed help, he said. And I know what it's like when nobody gives it. Lena's throat worked. She nodded once, then turned and walked to the door. Lena. She stopped, looked back. You did good today, Caleb said. In town, holding your head up like that. Something flickered in her eyes. Not quite a smile, not quite hope, but something close. Good night, Caleb. Good night. She left. Caleb stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the ghosts of his old life and the strange, uncertain shape of something new, and wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. The week turned into 2, then 3. Lena stayed, and Caleb didn't ask her to leave. She fell into the rhythm of the ranch like she'd been born to it. Mornings began before sunrise. Lena in the chicken coop, Caleb saddling horses. They worked the land together in a silence that felt less empty than it had before. She learned which cattle were prone to wandering, which fence posts needed replacing, how to read the sky for rain that never came. He learned she was stronger than she looked, stubborn when it mattered, and carried grief the way some women carried water, carefully, so it wouldn't spill. The drought deepened. The creek slowed to a whisper. Dust devils danced across the pastures, and the sun beat down like a hammer on an anvil. Caleb rationed water, moved the herd closer to the well, and watched the clouds refuse to gather. On a Tuesday morning in early October, Lena came back from feeding the chickens with her jaw set tight and her hands clenched. What happened? Caleb asked, looking up from the harness he was mending. She held out her hand. In her palm lay a dead chicken, neck twisted, feathers matted with blood. Found it outside the coop, she said. Wasn't a coyote, wasn't a fox. Caleb stood, took the bird from her, examined it. The break was clean, deliberate. Someone had killed it with their hands and left it there. When? He asked. Couldn't have been more than an hour ago. It was still warm. Caleb's gaze swept the property. The road was empty. The fields were still. But the message was clear. "Go inside," he said. "I'm not hiding." "I didn't ask you to hide. I asked you to go inside while I check the perimeter." Lena's eyes flashed. "If someone's trying to scare me off, I'd rather see them coming." "And if they're trying to do more than scare you?" She didn't answer, but she didn't move either. Caleb sighed, set the chicken down, and pulled the rifle from where it leaned against the barn wall. "Fine. Stay close." They circled the ranch together, checking fences, scanning tree lines, looking for tracks. Found nothing. Whoever had done it was long gone. When they returned to the yard, Caleb buried the chicken near the woodshed and stood there with the shovel in his hands, staring at the fresh-turned earth. "This is because of me," Lena said quietly. "This is because someone's got nothing better to do than be cruel." "It's the same thing," Caleb turned to face her. "You didn't kill that chicken. You didn't ask for trouble. Someone else brought it here, and that's on them, not you." Lena's mouth pressed into a thin line. "Maybe I should go." "Where?" "Anywhere." "So they win?" "So you don't get hurt because of me." Caleb stepped closer, close enough to see the fear she was trying to hide beneath anger. "I'm not afraid of chickens or cowards. And I'm not sending you away because someone wants to make a point. They'll keep pushing. Let them." "Caleb, you stay," he said, voice firm, "until you're ready to leave for your own reasons, not theirs." Lena looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her expression. Then she nodded once and walked toward the house. Caleb watched her go, then turned back to the grave he'd dug and wondered how many more he'd have to dig before this was over. That night, he slept with the rifle beside the bed. The harassment didn't stop. 3 days later, someone cut a section of fence on the eastern pasture, letting half the herd wander onto open range. It took Caleb and Lena 6 hours to round them up. The day after that, a rock came through the kitchen window while Lena was washing dishes. She swept up the glass without comment, boarded the window with planks, and went back to work. Caleb rode into town the next morning alone. He found Sheriff Tom Briggs, Walter's younger brother, sitting outside his office, whittling a piece of pine. "Tom?" Caleb said, dismounting. "Caleb," Tom didn't look up. "Heard you've had some trouble." "You could call it that. Fence cut, window broken. That about right? And a dead chicken." Tom's knife paused. "Someone killed your chicken?" "Snapped its neck and left it for Lena to find." "Lena. That the Crow girl?" "That's her." Tom set down his knife and leaned back in his chair, studying Caleb with weary eyes. "You know what people are saying, don't you? Don't much care." "Maybe you should. Girl shows up out of nowhere, parents dead under suspicious circumstances, moves in with a widower." "Her parents died of fever and grief," Caleb interrupted. "And she's working for room and board. That's it." "That how you see it?" "That's how it is," Tom sighed. "Caleb, I'm not saying I believe the talk, but talk has a way of turning into action, and when it does, people get hurt. Then do your job and find out who's harassing her. You got any proof it's harassment? Could have been kids. Could have been accidents." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You know damn well it wasn't." "What I know and what I can prove are two different things." Tom picked up his knife again. "My advice? Send the girl to the church. Let Reverend Parker find her a proper situation. Boarding house, maybe. Or a family that needs help. She's got a situation. One that's causing trouble. Only because people won't mind their own business." Tom looked at him then, really looked, and Caleb saw pity in the sheriff's eyes. That made it worse somehow. "You're a good man, Caleb," Tom said quietly. "But you can't save everyone. Sometimes the kindest thing is knowing when to let go." Caleb swung back into the saddle. "Thanks for nothing, Tom." He rode back to the ranch with anger simmering in his chest and the certainty that the law wouldn't help them settling like stone in his gut. When he got home, Lena was in the vegetable garden, pulling weeds from the drought-stunted tomato plants. She looked up as he dismounted. "What did the sheriff say?" she asked. "Nothing useful." She nodded, like she'd expected that, and went back to weeding. Caleb watched her work. This girl who'd shown up half dead in his cellar, and stayed even when staying meant facing cruelty every day. She could have run, could have disappeared into another town, another territory, another life, but she'd chosen to stay and fight for a piece of ground that wasn't even hers. "Lena," he said. She looked up. "Why are you still here?" She wiped dirt from her hands, considering the question. "You ever feel like if you run one more time, you'll disappear completely?" "Yeah," Caleb said. "I have." "Then you know why." She went back to weeding. Caleb stood there a moment longer, then headed to the barn to check on the horses, carrying the weight of her answer like a stone in his pocket. The next Sunday, Lena announced she was going to church. Caleb looked up from his coffee. "You don't have to do that." "I know." "Town folks won't be kind." "I know that too." "Then why?" Lena set down the dish she'd been drying. "Because I'm tired of hiding, tired of letting them think they've won. If I'm going to stay here, I need to show them I'm not afraid." "You don't have anything to prove." "Maybe not to you." Caleb studied her face, saw the determination there, and knew arguing would be pointless. "I'll come with you." "You don't go to church." "I do now." They rode to town together, dust rising from the horses' hooves, the morning sun already fierce. The church bells were ringing as they arrived, and people were filing inside, ranchers in their best shirts, wives in faded Sunday dresses, children scrubbed clean and squirming. Conversation stopped when Caleb and Lena dismounted. Heads turned. Whispers started like wind through dry grass. Margaret Cole stood on the church steps, arms crossed, lips pursed. "Well," she said loudly, "look who decided to show up." Caleb ignored her. He offered Lena his arm. She took it, and together they walked up the steps and through the church doors. Inside, the pews were mostly full. Caleb led Lena to a spot near the back. People shifted away, leaving an empty space around them like they carried disease. Lena sat with her back straight, hands folded in her lap, eyes forward. Reverend Parker was a soft-spoken man with kind eyes and a voice that rarely rose above a murmur. He began the service with a reading from Psalms, something about righteousness and judgment. Caleb didn't pay much attention. He was too busy watching the congregation watch Lena. Most of the stares were subtle, sideways glances, quick looks over shoulders, but some were open, cold, assessing, hostile. Margaret Cole sat 3 rows ahead, turning every few minutes to glare. Halfway through the sermon, a woman's voice rang out from the front pew. "Reverend, I have a question." Parker paused. "Yes, Mrs. Thornton?" Abigail Thornton stood. She was a large woman with iron-gray hair and a face like carved granite. Her husband owned the largest spread in the territory, which gave her the confidence to speak when others wouldn't. "Is it true," she said, voice carrying through the small church, "that we're allowing sinners to sit among the faithful?" The room went silent. Parker's expression tightened. "Mrs. Thornton, everyone is welcome in the Lord's house. Even those living in sin? I don't know what you're implying." "I'm implying that young woman," she pointed at Lena, "is living alone with a man who isn't her husband. That's called fornication, Reverend, and it has no place in a Christian community." Lena's face went pale, but she didn't move. Caleb started to rise, but Lena's hand shot out and gripped his arm. "Don't," she whispered. "Mrs. Thornton," Parker said carefully, "making accusations without evidence is a serious matter." "The evidence is sitting right there," Abigail snapped. "Everyone knows it. Everyone's talking about it. The only question is what you're going to do about it." Parker looked at Caleb and Lena, conflict written across his face. He was a good man, but he was also a man who depended on donations to keep the church running, and the Thorntons gave more than anyone. "Perhaps," Parker said slowly, "it would be best if we discussed this privately after the service." Lena stood, every eye in the church fixed on her. "No need to discuss anything privately, Reverend," she said, voice steady despite the tremor Caleb could hear underneath. "I'll save you the trouble." She stepped into the aisle and faced Abigail Thornton directly. "You want to know the truth?" Lena said. "My parents died. Both of them. I had nowhere to go and nothing to eat. Caleb Harlan gave me work and a place to sleep in exchange for honest labor. That's all. We're not living in sin. We're barely living in the same building. But even if we were, it wouldn't be your business." "A young woman's virtue is everyone's business," Abigail shot back. "My virtue is mine," Lena said, Not yours, not the church's, mine. And I don't owe you or anyone else an explanation for how I survive. How dare you? How dare you? Lena interrupted, voice rising now. How dare you stand in a church and accuse me of sin when you don't know the first thing about my life? When you've never asked if I needed help, never offered a kind word, never done anything but judge from a distance. Abigail's face flushed red. You insolent— That's enough, Caleb said, standing. He moved to Lena's side, placed a hand on her shoulder. She was shaking now, whether from anger or fear he couldn't tell. Lena works for me, Caleb said, voice carrying through the church. She's honest, hardworking, and hasn't done a single thing to deserve your scorn. If you've got a problem with that, take it up with me, but leave her alone. We're trying to protect the morality of this community, Margaret Cole called from her pew. You're trying to tear down a girl who's already lost everything, Caleb said. That's not morality, that's cruelty. Reverend Parker raised his hands. Please, let's all calm down. I'm perfectly calm, Caleb said. We came here in good faith, but it's clear we're not welcome, so we'll leave. He offered Lena his arm again. She took it, and together they walked down the aisle toward the door. Behind them, voices erupted, some angry, some approving, all of them loud. They stepped out into the bright morning and walked to their horses without speaking. Caleb helped Lena mount, then swung into his own saddle. As they rode away from the church, Lena finally spoke. I'm sorry, she said. For what? For making a scene. For embarrassing you. Caleb looked at her, saw tears streaking her dusty cheeks, and felt something fierce and protective rise in his chest. You didn't embarrass me, he said. You stood up for yourself. That took courage. Didn't feel like courage. Never does. They rode the rest of the way in silence, and when they reached the ranch, Lena dismounted and went straight to the barn without looking back. Caleb let her go. Some wounds needed privacy to bleed. That night, a storm rolled in from the west. It came fast, turning the sky black and splitting it with lightning. Thunder shook the ground. Wind tore at the barn roof and sent the chickens into a panic. Rain fell in sheets, the first real rain in months, turning the dusty yard to mud. Caleb stood on the porch, watching the storm, listening to the roar of water against earth. He should have felt relief. The drought was breaking, the land would recover, but all he felt was the cold weight of exhaustion. A flash of lightning illuminated the yard, and he saw Lena standing near the barn, soaked to the skin, face turned up to the rain. He grabbed a coat and ran out to her. Get inside, he shouted over the thunder. She didn't move. Lena. She turned to look at him, and in the lightning's glow he saw her face, not crying, but broken open in a way he hadn't seen before. I found him hanging in the barn, she said. Caleb froze. My father. He used a rope from the hayloft. I cut him down, but he was already cold. I had to dig 2 graves because the ground was so hard. It took me all day. And when I was done, I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there until it got dark. The rain poured down between them. I didn't tell you because I didn't know how, Lena continued, voice raw. Didn't know how to say I buried my father with my own hands and then walked away like he was nothing, like they were both nothing. They weren't nothing, Caleb said. They left me. They died. It's the same thing. No, Caleb said firmly. It's not. Lightning split the sky. Thunder followed close enough to feel in their bones. You want to know why I didn't leave when people started threatening me? Lena asked. Because leaving is what I do. It's what I've always done. Every time something got hard, every time someone looked at me wrong, I ran. But if I run now, I'll spend the rest of my life running, and I'm tired, Caleb. I'm so tired. Caleb stepped closer, close enough to see the rain streaming down her face, mixing with tears she didn't bother to hide. Then don't run, he said. What if I can't do this? You've been doing it, every single day. What if it's not enough? It's enough, Caleb said. You're enough. Lena's face crumpled. She bent forward, hands braced on her knees, and sobbed, deep, wrenching sounds that tore out of her like they'd been buried too long. Caleb didn't touch her, didn't try to fix it. He just stood there in the rain, a silent witness to her breaking, and let her cry until she had nothing left. When she finally straightened, exhausted and shaking, he spoke quietly. Come inside. Dry off. Rest. She nodded, too tired to argue, and let him lead her back to the house. He lit the stove, handed her a towel and dry clothes, and turned his back while she changed. When she was done, he poured her coffee and set it on the table. She wrapped her hands around the cup, staring into it like it held answers. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not telling me it's going to be all right." Caleb sat down across from her. "I don't know if it will be." "I know." "But you're still here." "So are you." He smiled faintly. "Guess we're both stubborn." "Guess so?" They sat together in the quiet kitchen, listening to the rain hammer the roof. And for the first time in 3 years, Caleb didn't feel quite so alone. The rain continued through the night and into the next day, turning the parched earth to mud and filling the creek until it sang. Caleb stood at the window watching water pool in the yard, listening to Lena move quietly through the house behind him. She hadn't mentioned the night before, and he hadn't asked. Some confessions didn't need to be revisited. By mid-morning, the storm had gentled to a steady drizzle. Caleb pulled on his coat and headed out to check the animals. The chickens huddled in their coop, ruffled and indignant. The cattle stood in clusters under what shelter they could find, steam rising from their backs. Everything was soggy but alive. When he returned to the house, Lena had breakfast waiting, eggs, biscuits, the last of the bacon. She set a plate in front of him without meeting his eyes. "You didn't have to cook," he said. "I know." They ate in silence. The rain drummed against the roof. Caleb could feel questions gathering in the space between them, but neither spoke them aloud. Finally, Lena pushed her plate away and looked at him directly. "What happens now?" "With what?" "The town. The church. People like Mrs. Thornton." Caleb considered that. "They'll keep talking. Maybe they'll do more than talk. Hard to say. And you're all right with that." "Doesn't matter if I'm all right with it. It's happening either way." Lena's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup. "I could leave. Make it easier for you. We already had this conversation. That was before I stood up in church and made enemies of half the town." "You told the truth," Caleb said. "If that makes enemies, they weren't friends to begin with." "Truth doesn't pay bills or mend fences." "No, but it lets you sleep at night." Lena's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "You really don't care what people think, do you?" "I care about what's right. What people think about it is their problem." She studied him for a long moment, something unreadable in her expression. Then she stood, collected the dishes, and carried them to the wash basin. Caleb watched her work, this girl who'd arrived half dead and stayed through harassment and storms, and wondered when exactly she'd stopped being a stranger. The rain finally stopped 3 days later, leaving the world clean and dripping. Caleb and Lena spent the morning repairing fence posts that had loosened in the mud. They worked side by side in easy silence, Caleb digging while Lena steadied the posts and tamped the earth. Around noon, a rider appeared on the eastern road. Caleb straightened, shading his eyes. As the figure drew closer, he recognized Walter Briggs from the general store, sitting heavy in the saddle, face grim. "Caleb," Walter called, reining in his horse. His gaze flicked to Lena, then back. "Got a minute?" "I'm listening." Walter dismounted, pulled off his hat, and worked it between his hands. "There's been some talk in town. Thought you should hear it from me." "What kind of talk?" "The kind that says maybe the girl should move along, for everyone's sake." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Everyone's sake, or just the folks who can't mind their own business?" "Don't be like that. You know how it is. People get ideas, and once those ideas take root—" "Let me stop you right there," Caleb said. "Lena works for me. She's done nothing wrong, and I'm not sending her away because some people got small minds and big mouths." Walter sighed heavily. "Caleb, I'm trying to help you. The Thorntons have been pressuring the church. Margaret's got half the women's auxiliary stirred up. Even Sheriff Tom is getting questions about whether there's legal grounds to Legal grounds for what? Existing? For a young woman living in an unmarried man's household without proper supervision." Lena, who'd been silent until now, set down the post she was holding and faced Walter directly. "I'm not a child, Mr. Briggs. I don't need supervision." Walter's expression softened slightly. "I'm not saying you do, miss. But the law's the law, and if enough people push, Tom might have to enforce it. Enforce what exactly? Caleb asked, voice dangerous and quiet. Vagrancy laws, morality ordinances, there are ways to make it difficult for her to stay. So it's threats now. It's a warning. As a friend. Some friend. Walter put his hat back on, resignation in every line of his face. I'm just the messenger, Caleb. Don't shoot me for it. Tell whoever sent you that Lena stays. If they've got a problem with that, they can bring it to me directly instead of hiding behind legal language. Walter nodded slowly, climbed back into his saddle, and looked down at them both. For what it's worth, I don't think you're doing anything wrong, but right and wrong don't always matter when enough people decide otherwise. He rode away, leaving Caleb and Lena standing in the muddy field. They're not going to stop, Lena said quietly. No, they're not. Maybe I should— Don't, Caleb interrupted. Don't say you should leave. I'm tired of hearing it. Then what should I say? Caleb looked at her, this stubborn, brave girl who'd survived things that would have broken most people. Say you're staying. Say you'll fight. Say something other than giving up. Lena's eyes searched his face. Why does it matter so much to you? Because you remind me what it's like to care about something other than survival, Caleb thought. Because you brought life back to a place that was dying. Because I'm tired of being alone. But what he said was, because it's the right thing. Lena held his gaze a moment longer, then nodded. All right, I'll stay. Good. They went back to work. That evening, Caleb rode into town alone. He found Sheriff Tom in his office, paperwork spread across his desk, a lamp burning against the gathering dusk. Tom looked up when Caleb walked in. Figured I'd be seeing you. Walter came by. I know, I sent him. Caleb closed the door behind him. You planning to enforce those laws he mentioned? Tom leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Depends. On what? On whether you force my hand. Caleb, I've known you a long time. You're a good man. But this situation with the Crow girl, it's causing problems. The only problem is people won't leave well enough alone. Maybe, but when enough people complain, I have to respond. That's my job. Your job is keeping the peace, not harassing innocent people because the town busybodies got their noses bent. Tom's expression hardened. Watch your tone. Or what? You'll arrest me for speaking my mind? I'll do what I have to do to keep order in this town. Caleb stepped closer to the desk. Then let me make this real simple for you, Tom. Lena Crow works for me. She lives on my property in my barn. She's done nothing illegal, nothing immoral, and nothing that warrants your attention. If you or anyone else tries to run her off, you're going to have a problem. That a threat? It's a fact. Tom stood slowly, matching Caleb's stance. You'd really go to war over this girl? I'd go to war over what's right. For a long moment they stared at each other across the scarred wooden desk. Then Tom sat back down, scrubbing a hand over his face. I don't want trouble, Caleb. Then don't make any. The Thorntons are pushing hard. Margaret's got the women all riled up. Reverend Parker's caught in the middle. Sooner or later, something's got to give. Let it be them, not us. Tom looked at him with something like pity. You really think you can win this? Don't have to win. Just have to not lose. Caleb turned and walked out before Tom could respond. The confrontation came 2 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon when Lena rode into town for supplies. She went alone despite Caleb's offer to come. I can't hide behind you forever, she'd said, and he'd understood even as he disliked it. She tied Clover outside the general store and went inside. Walter was behind the counter as usual, and 2 other women were examining fabric near the window. They looked up when Lena entered, exchanged glances, and turned their backs. Lena ignored them. She gathered what she needed, flour, salt, a tin of coffee, and brought it to the counter. Walter rang up the items without meeting her eyes. That'll be $2. Lena counted out the coins Caleb had given her and set them on the counter. Walter swept them into his cash box and bagged her purchases in silence. Thank you, Lena said. Walter grunted. Lena picked up her bag and turned to leave. She was halfway to the door when one of the women spoke. Shameless. Lena stopped. Parading around town like she's respectable, the woman continued, voice pitched to Carrie. Living in sin and acting like butter wouldn't melt. The second woman laughed, sharp and ugly. Maybe she doesn't know what respectable means. Lena's hand tightened on the bag. She should have kept walking, should have ignored them the way she'd ignored everything else. But something in their laughter, the casual cruelty of it, struck a match inside her. She turned around. "You're right," Lena said calmly. "I don't know what respectable means. Maybe you could explain it to me." The first woman, a pinch-faced creature named Sarah Miller, flushed. "Excuse me? Respectable. Does it mean spreading gossip about people you've never spoken to? Or maybe it means judging someone's virtue based on where they sleep instead of how they act? How dare you? Or maybe," Lena continued, voice rising, "it means being so empty inside that the only way you feel important is by tearing other people down." Sarah's face went scarlet. "You insolent little—" The door banged open. Margaret Cole swept in like a thundercloud, eyes blazing. "I heard raised voices," Margaret announced. "What's going on here?" "This girl," Sarah said, pointing at Lena, "is being disrespectful." "Is she now?" Margaret's gaze raked over Lena. "Seems to be a habit with her." Lena met Margaret's eyes steadily. "I was just leaving." "Good. We don't need your kind here." "My kind?" "Women with loose morals and no shame." Lena set down her bag. "You don't know anything about my morals." "I know you're living with a man you're not married to. That tells me everything I need to know." "It tells you I'm surviving, nothing more." "Is that what they're calling it these days?" Margaret sneered. Lena took a step forward. "You want to know the truth, Mrs. Cole? I sleep in a barn. I work from dawn until dusk. I haven't had a full meal I didn't earn in months. Caleb Harlan has shown me more kindness and decency than anyone in this town, and the only thing immoral about that is how much it bothers you." "Because it's not proper." "Proper." Lena's voice shook now, but not with fear. "My mother died of fever. My father hung himself. I had nowhere to go and no one to help me. When I showed up at Caleb's ranch half dead and starving, he didn't ask if it was proper. He asked if I was hurt. That's the difference between him and everyone in this town." Margaret's mouth opened and closed. Sarah looked away. "You want me gone because I make you uncomfortable," Lena continued. "Because you can't control me or shame me or put me in whatever box makes you feel safe. But I'm not leaving. I'm not hiding, and I'm not apologizing for surviving." She picked up her bag and walked toward the door. Margaret moved to block her path. "This isn't over," Margaret hissed. "Yes," Lena said quietly. "It is." She stepped around Margaret and out into the bright afternoon. Behind her, the store erupted in angry voices, but she didn't look back. She untied Clover, mounted, and rode out of town with her spine straight and her hands steady. She didn't cry until she was a mile down the road, where no one could see. Caleb was mending the corral fence when Lena returned. He saw her face and knew immediately something had happened. "What did they do?" he asked. Lena dismounted, hands shaking slightly as she unsaddled Clover. "Nothing I couldn't handle." "Lena," she told him, all of it. The women in the store, Margaret's confrontation, the words she'd said that couldn't be taken back. When she finished, Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "You should have let me come," he said finally. "No, I needed to do it myself." "And now they'll push harder." "I know." Caleb studied her face, saw the exhaustion and defiance warring there. "You all right?" "I don't know. Ask me tomorrow." That night, they sat on the porch together, watching the sunset behind the mountains. The air was cool, carrying the scent of wet earth and sage. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. "My father used to say the land doesn't care about your problems," Lena said suddenly. "It doesn't care if you're sad or scared or angry. It just exists, and you have to exist alongside it." Sounds like a hard man. He was, but he wasn't wrong. Caleb looked at her. "Is that how you survived? By not caring?" "By learning not to expect anything. Expectations hurt. This way I'm never disappointed." "That's not surviving. That's just not dying." Lena turned to face him. "What's the difference?" "One's about making it through the day. The other's about having something worth making it through for." "And which one are you doing?" The question hit harder than Caleb expected. He thought about the 3 years since Mary died. The silence. The routine. The careful numbness he'd wrapped around himself like armor. "I was just not dying," he admitted, "until you showed up." Lena's breath caught. "Caleb, I'm not saying this to make you uncomfortable," he said quickly. "I'm saying it because it's true. You reminded me what it feels like to care about something other than the next day's work. And maybe that scares the town because it scares me too. Why does it scare you?" "Because caring means you can lose again. And I've lost enough." Lena was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "My mother told me once that the only thing worse than losing what you love is never loving anything at all. I didn't understand it then. I think I'm starting to now." They sat in silence as darkness gathered around them. The stars emerged cold and distant and beautiful. "Thank you," Lena said softly. "For what?" "For not trying to fix me. For just letting me be broken until I'm ready not to be." Caleb reached over and squeezed her hand once, briefly. "You're not broken. You're just healing." "Is there a difference?" "All the difference in the world." The next morning brought riders. Caleb heard them coming before he saw them, 6 men on horseback moving at a deliberate pace down the road toward the ranch. He recognized most of them. Frank Thornton, Abigail's husband, rode in front. Beside him was Deputy Carl Mason, Tom Briggs's right hand. The others were ranchers and shopkeepers, solid men who followed where Thornton led. Caleb walked out to meet them, rifle in hand but pointed at the ground. Behind him, Lena emerged from the barn. "Stay inside," Caleb said quietly. "No." "Lena, I said no." She moved to stand beside him, and Caleb didn't have time to argue before the riders reined in their horses 10 feet away. Frank Thornton was a big man with a gray beard and cold eyes. He sat his horse like he owned the territory, and in many ways he did. "Caleb," Thornton said, nodding. "Miss Crow." "Mr. Thornton," Caleb replied evenly. "What brings you out here?" "Concerned citizens. We've had complaints about the situation here, and we thought it best to address them directly." "What situation would that be?" "The young woman living on your property without proper supervision or chaperone. It's causing talk, and talk leads to trouble." "Only trouble I see is 6 men showing up uninvited with a deputy in tow." Thornton's expression didn't change. "We're here to offer a solution. The church has agreed to take Miss Crow in. Reverend Parker will find her suitable work and lodging in town. Respectable arrangement. Everyone benefits." Lena's voice cut through the morning air, clear and hard. "I'm not interested." "Miss Crow," Thornton said, "this isn't a negotiation." "You're right. It's not. Because I'm not leaving." Deputy Mason shifted in his saddle. "Ma'am, if you refuse, we have authority under territorial law." "What law?" Caleb interrupted. "What law says a woman can't work for room and board?" "Vagrancy laws, morality statutes. We can make it very difficult for both of you if this continues." "Then make it difficult," Caleb said. "But she's not going anywhere." Thornton's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake, Harlan. Wouldn't be my first. Think carefully. You're just one man. We represent the community, the law. You can't win this." Caleb raised the rifle slightly, not threatening but unmistakable. "Maybe not, but I can make sure you don't either." The air went tight and dangerous. Hands moved toward holsters. Horses stamped nervously. Then a new voice called out from the road. "That's far enough, gentlemen." Everyone turned. Sheriff Tom Briggs rode up on his dappled gray, expression grim. He positioned his horse between Caleb and Thornton's group. "Tom," Thornton said, "we're handling this." "No," Tom said. "You're threatening a man on his own property, and that's where I draw the line. We have legal grounds. You have complaints, not the same thing." Tom looked at Caleb. "Put the rifle down." Caleb lowered it. Tom turned back to Thornton. "Unless you've got evidence of actual criminal activity, and gossip doesn't count, you need to leave this man alone. The community doesn't get to demand anything that violates the law. Miss Crow has committed no crime, neither has Caleb. So unless you want me to start asking about harassment and trespassing, I suggest you ride back to town." Thornton's face went red. "You're making a mistake, Tom." "Maybe. but it's mine to make." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Thornton jerked his horse's head around and spurred it back toward the road. The others followed, Carl Mason looking back once with something like regret. When they were gone, Tom dismounted and faced Caleb. "I bought you some time," Tom said, "but not much. Thornton's not going to let this go." "I know. And next time I might not be able to stop him." "I know that too." Tom looked at Lena. "Miss, if there's any way you could—" "There isn't," Lena said firmly. Tom sighed. "Then you're both stubborn fools, and I'll do what I can to keep you alive." He mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Caleb and Lena standing in the yard as dust settled around them. Lena's hands were shaking. Caleb noticed and gently took the rifle from her. "You should have let me handle that alone," he said. "They came because of me. I wasn't going to hide." "You could have been hurt." "So could you." They looked at each other, and Caleb saw fear in her eyes. Not for herself, but for him. It shook something loose in his chest. "This is going to get worse before it gets better," he said. "I know." "You can still leave. No shame in it." Lena's jaw set. "I told you before, I'm done running." Pause. "Even if it means standing in the storm?" "Especially then." Caleb nodded slowly. "All right, then we stand together." "Together," Lena agreed. And in that moment, on that dusty Wyoming ranch with threats gathering like clouds on the horizon, they made a choice that would change everything. The days after Thornton's visit passed in uneasy quiet. Caleb worked the fence lines with one eye always on the road. Lena moved through her chores with a tension that hadn't been there before, jumping at distant sounds, watching the horizon. They didn't talk about what might come next. Words felt too fragile for the weight they carried. On the fourth morning, a rider came, not from town, but from the east. A boy, maybe 12, on a swayback mare that looked ready to collapse. He pulled up in the yard, breathless and wide-eyed. "Mr. Harlan," he gasped. "My pa sent me. Said you got a woman here who knows about healing." Caleb stepped out from the barn, Lena close behind. "What happened?" "My brother. He's been bit. Snake got him while he was checking the water troughs. Ma tried poulticing it, but it's not working. He's real sick, Mr. Harlan. Real sick." "Where's the doctor?" Caleb asked. 3 towns over, delivering a baby. Won't be back till tomorrow, maybe later." The boy's voice cracked. "Pa said, he said we heard the Crow girl knows plants and such. Said maybe she could help." Lena went still. "Who's your father?" "Henry Cole, ma'am. We got the spread 5 miles south of town." Margaret Cole's brother-in-law, the family that had stood silent while Margaret tore into Lena at the church. The same family whose wife had laughed with Sarah Miller in the general store. Caleb looked at Lena, saw the conflict warring in her face. She had every reason to refuse, every right to let them face the consequences of their cruelty. "How long ago was he bit?" Lena asked quietly. 2 hours, maybe 3. His legs all swelled up. He's got fever, and he keeps saying things that don't make sense. Lena's jaw tightened. Then she turned to Caleb. "I need my satchel from the barn, the leather one by the grain sacks." "Lena." "Now please." Caleb fetched it while Lena grabbed her coat. When he returned, she was already mounting Clover. "You don't have to do this," Caleb said. "Yes, I do." "They don't deserve—" "The boy does," Lena interrupted. "Whatever his family's done, he doesn't deserve to die because of it." Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to protect her from more hurt, but he saw the steel in her eyes and knew it was pointless. "I'm coming with you." "You don't need to." "I'm coming." They rode out together, following the boy whose mare struggled to keep pace. The Cole ranch was smaller than Caleb's, buildings weathered and in need of repair. Henry Cole met them in the yard, a lean man with desperation etched into every line of his face. Behind him stood his wife, Ruth, the woman who'd laughed at Lena in the store. Ruth's face drained of color when she saw Lena dismount. "Henry," Ruth whispered, "what is she doing here?" "Saving our boy if she can," Henry said roughly. "Now get inside and shut your mouth." He led them into the house. The boy, Tommy, they learned, lay on a bed in the back room, thrashing and moaning. His right leg was swollen to twice its normal size. skin mottled purple and black. The stink of infection filled the small space. Lena knelt beside the bed and examined the wound. 2 puncture marks, red and angry, surrounded by tissue that looked ready to burst. She touched his forehead, felt the fever raging. "How long has he been like this?" she asked. "Started getting bad about an hour ago," Henry said. "Got worse fast." "Did you see the snake?" "Rattler, big one, 4 feet at least." Lena's expression didn't change, but Caleb saw her hands clench briefly. Rattlesnake venom. Serious, potentially fatal, especially in a child. "I need hot water," Lena said. "Clean cloths. Whiskey if you have it. And I need everyone out except Mr. Harlan." Ruth moved toward the door, then stopped. Can you save him?" Lena looked up and Caleb saw something complicated pass between the 2 women. Recognition, maybe, or the acknowledgement of a debt that couldn't be spoken. "I don't know," Lena said honestly, "but I'm going to try." Ruth nodded and left. Henry followed, closing the door behind them. Lena opened her satchel and pulled out small cloth bundles. Dried herbs, roots, things Caleb didn't recognize. She worked quickly, grinding plants between her palms, mixing them with water Ruth brought. "What are you doing?" Caleb asked. "Yarrow and plantain to draw out poison, echinacea for infection, willow bark for fever." Her hands moved with practiced certainty. "My mother taught me. Said every woman should know how to heal because doctors don't come when you need them." She made a poultice and packed it against the wound, then wrapped the leg in clean cloths soaked in her herbal mixture. Tommy cried out, delirious with pain and fever. "Hold his shoulders," Lena instructed. Caleb did, feeling the boy's small body convulse beneath his hands. Lena worked with steady focus, changing compresses, checking his pulse, whispering things Caleb couldn't hear. Hours passed. The light through the window shifted from afternoon to evening. Finally, near dusk, Tommy's thrashing eased. His breathing steadied. The fever broke in a sudden sweat that soaked the sheets. Lena sat back on her heels, exhausted. "He's through the worst of it." "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be. The swelling's going down, fever's broke. If infection doesn't set in, he'll live." Caleb felt something unclench in his chest. "How did you know what to do?" "I didn't. Not entirely. I just did what my mother would have done and hoped it was enough." She stood, swayed slightly. Caleb caught her elbow. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked. "This morning." "Come on, let's tell them." They found Henry and Ruth in the kitchen, sitting at the table in silence. Ruth had been crying. Henry stood when they entered. "He's alive," Lena said simply. "Fever's broken. He'll need to rest and the wound will need cleaning, but he should recover." Ruth made a sound that was half sob, half prayer. She pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Henry's throat worked. "Thank you," he managed. "Thank you, Miss Crow." Lena nodded, collected her satchel. "Change the dressing twice a day. Keep the wound clean. If the swelling returns or he gets hot again, send for a doctor immediately." "We will, I promise." Henry hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a fold of bills. "For your trouble. I don't want your money." "Please." "You saved our boy. Let us—" "I said no." Lena's voice was gentle but firm. "I didn't do this for money." "Then why?" Ruth asked, finally finding her voice. "After what we... Because he needed help," Lena said. "That's all." Ruth stood, crossed the kitchen, and stopped in front of Lena. For a moment they just looked at each other, 2 women separated by cruelty and bridged by mercy. "I'm sorry," Ruth whispered, "for what I said, how I treated you. I was wrong." Lena's eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady. "Yes, you were. Can you forgive me?" "I don't know yet. Ask me again when I'm not so tired." Ruth nodded, understanding that was more than she deserved. "Will you at least stay for supper? It's not much, but we need to get back," Caleb said. "Before dark." Henry walked them out to their horses. "Miss Crow," he said as Lena mounted, "I know you got no reason to trust my word, but what you did today, people will hear about it, and maybe it'll change some minds." Maybe, Lena said. Or maybe it won't. Either way, I hope Tommy heals well. They rode back as the sun touched the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Neither spoke for the first mile. Finally, Caleb said, "That was a good thing you did." I just did what needed doing. Not everyone would have. Not after how they treated you. Lena was quiet for a long moment. My mother used to say that kindness isn't about deserving. It's about choosing to be better than the hurt that's been done to you. Sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. Didn't make her life any easier, but she was wise. They rode on through the gathering dusk, and Caleb found himself thinking about choices and consequences, about the difference between justice and mercy, about this girl who'd appeared half dead in his cellar and taught him things he'd forgotten about being human. Word spread fast. By the next afternoon, Walter Briggs rode out to the ranch. He dismounted slowly, hat in his hands, looking uncomfortable. "Caleb, Miss Crow." "Walter," Caleb acknowledged. "Heard what you did for the Cole boy. Henry came into town this morning, told everyone who'd listen. Said you saved Tommy's life." Lena, who'd been feeding chickens, straightened. "I did what I could." "Well, it was more than most would have done, especially considering—" He cleared his throat. "Anyway, I wanted to say thank you. Tommy's a good kid. Would have been a shame to lose him." "You're welcome." Walter shifted his weight. "Also wanted to say I'm sorry for the way folks have treated you, for the things that were said." He looked at Caleb. "Both of you. Wasn't right." "No," Caleb agreed. "It wasn't. Some of us are trying to make it right. Thought you should know." He rode away before either of them could respond. Over the next week, others came. Not many, but enough. A woman named Sarah appeared with a basket of eggs and an apology that stumbled over itself. 2 ranchers stopped by to offer help with the harvest. Even Reverend Parker made the journey, Bible tucked under his arm, shame in his eyes. "I should have stood up for you," he told Lena. "In the church. I let fear of consequence override what I knew was right. I'm sorry." "It's easy to stay silent," Lena said. "Harder to speak up." "I understand." "Understanding isn't the same as forgiveness." "No, but it's a start." Not everyone came around. Margaret Cole remained tight-lipped and hostile. The Thorntons made it clear they still considered the situation scandalous. But the tide had shifted just slightly, enough that when Lena walked into town the following Saturday, the stares were less hostile and the whispers less cruel. She was at the counter in the general store when Abigail Thornton swept in, took one look at her, and turned to leave. But at the door, Abigail paused. "My nephew lives," she said without turning around. "Ruth tells me that's because of you." "Yes, ma'am." "I still don't approve of your living arrangements, but I won't stand in your way anymore." It wasn't an apology, it wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. Abigail left. Walter, who'd witnessed the exchange, shook his head. "That's as close to thanks as you'll get from her." "I'll take it," Lena said. That evening, Caleb found Lena sitting on the porch, watching the sun set. He settled beside her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Seems like things are settling," he said, offering her a cup. "Maybe." She accepted it, warming her hands against the tin. "Or maybe they're just tired of fighting." "Does it matter which?" "I suppose not." They drank in comfortable silence. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermal currents. In the distance, cattle lowed. "You ever think about leaving?" Caleb asked. "Really leaving, I mean. Not because you're running, but because you want to see what else is out there." Lena considered that. "Sometimes. But then I think about all the places I've been, and how none of them felt like anything. Just places to pass through on the way to somewhere else. And here?" She looked at him, something soft and uncertain in her expression. "Here feels like I could stop passing through. If I wanted to." "Do you want to?" "I'm starting to think I might." Caleb's chest tightened. He wanted to say something, wanted to tell her that she'd changed everything without trying, that the ranch felt alive again in ways he'd thought impossible. That somewhere between the cellar and this moment, he'd started caring more than was probably wise. But what he said was, "You'd be welcome to. Stay, I mean, for as long as you want." Lena smiled, small and real. "I know." 3 days later, Sheriff Tom rode out with news that changed everything again. He found Caleb in the barn, repairing tack. Lena was in the house, kneading bread. "Got something you need to hear," Tom said, dismounting. Caleb set down the leather strap he'd been working. "Good news or bad? Depends on how you look at it. The Crow homestead, someone's made a claim on it." Caleb went still. "What kind of claim?" "Legal one. Banks foreclosing for unpaid debts. Property goes to auction next month." "Who's buying?" Tom's expression was grim. "Frank Thornton." The words hit like a fist. "Why would Thornton want that land? It's barely worth farming." "It's not the land he wants, it's what it represents. With the Crow place gone, there's no trace left of Lena's family. No proof she's got any right to be here." "She's got every right. I know that. You know that. But Thornton's been digging, looking for ways to challenge her residency. If she's got no property, no family ties, no legal claim to the territory, he can make a case for vagrancy, force her to move on." Caleb's hands clenched. "That's legal?" "Enough that it'd tie you up in courts for months, and in the meantime, there'd be pressure. Lots of it." "What can we do?" Tom looked uncomfortable. "Only thing that'd settle it for certain is if she had legal standing. Family, marriage, something that gives her an uncontestable right to stay." The implication hung between them. "You're saying I should marry her," Caleb said flatly. "I'm saying it's an option, not the only one, but the cleanest. She's barely 20 years old. And you're what, 35? It's not unheard of. It's not right. She shouldn't have to marry someone just to keep a roof over her head. Maybe not, but we're talking about what works, not what's right." Caleb scrubbed a hand over his face. "I need to think about this." "Don't think too long. Auction's in 3 weeks." Tom left. Caleb stood in the barn, surrounded by the smell of hay and leather and horses, and tried to untangle the mess of feelings knotting in his chest. Marriage. To Lena. The girl who'd shown up half dead and stayed through everything. The girl who'd made him remember what it felt like to care. The girl he'd been trying very hard not to fall in love with. He found her in the kitchen, hands dusted with flour, working dough with steady rhythm. She looked up when he entered, saw his face, and stopped. "What happened?" He told her. All of it. The foreclosure, Thornton's plan, Tom's suggestion. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing more closed with each word. When he finished, she turned back to the dough and began kneading again. "So that's it then," she said quietly. "Marry you or leave?" "No, that's not. There have to be other options." "Are there?" Caleb wanted to say yes, wanted to promise he'd find another way, but he couldn't lie to her. "I don't know," he admitted. Lena's hands stilled. "Would you do it? Marry me, I mean, if it came to that." "I'm not going to force you into marriage, Lena. That's not what I asked." Caleb met her eyes, saw fear and hope, and something he couldn't name all tangled together. "If it meant you could stay," he said carefully. "If it meant you'd be safe and legal and no one could touch you, yes, I'd do it." "Even though you don't love me?" The question hurt worse than it should have. "Who says I don't?" Lena's breath caught. "Caleb, I'm not asking you to feel the same way," he said quickly. "I'm just saying, if we did this, it wouldn't be a hardship for me. It'd be a choice I'd make gladly." They stared at each other across the flour-dusted table, the unspoken truth of it settling between them like dust after a storm. "I need time to think," Lena said finally. "Take all the time you need." She nodded and went back to kneading, and Caleb left her there, knowing he'd just laid his heart bare and having no idea what she'd do with it. That night, Lena didn't come to supper. Caleb ate alone, forcing down food that tasted like ashes, then sat on the porch and watched the darkness gather. Around midnight, he heard footsteps. Lena emerged from the barn, wrapped in a shawl, and crossed the yard to where he sat. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Can you?" "No." She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. For a long time, neither spoke. "I've been thinking about my parents," Lena said eventually, "about the choices they made. My mother married my father because her family arranged it. She never loved him, not really, but she stayed because leaving wasn't an option, and it broke something in her year by year until there wasn't enough left to fight the fever. I'm sorry. My father loved her, though, desperately. It's why he couldn't survive without her. He'd built his whole life around someone who'd never chosen to be there. She turned to look at Caleb. I don't want that. Not for you. Not for me. I'm not asking you to love me, Lena. I know. But if we did this, if we married, I'd want it to mean something. I'd want it to be real, even if it started as practical. Caleb's heart hammered. What are you saying? I'm saying I need to know if you're offering marriage as a legal convenience or as something more. He thought about the careful distance he'd maintained, the feelings he'd tried to ignore, the way she'd become essential to him without him quite noticing when or how. I'm offering whatever you want it to be, he said. If you want legal protection and nothing more, I can do that. If you want more, I can do that too. And what do you want? Caleb looked at her in the moonlight, this brave, stubborn, beautiful woman who'd walked into his life carrying death and brought it back to something like living. I want you to stay, he said quietly. However you'll have me, for whatever reasons you choose. I want mornings where we work side by side and evenings where we sit together like this. I want to know you're safe and here and choosing to be here. That's what I want. Lena's eyes shimmered. That's a lot to promise someone you've only known a few months. Some people you know in years. Some you know in moments. Doesn't make it less real. She reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. Her palm was rough with work, warm, alive. All right, she said. All right, what? All right, I'll marry you. Not because I have to, because I want to see what we could be if we chose each other instead of circumstance choosing for us. Caleb squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of the promise settling around them. You're sure? No, but I'm willing to try if you are. I am. They sat together under the Wyoming stars, hands clasped, two broken people choosing to build something whole. And for the first time in 3 years, Caleb felt something that might have been hope taking root in the ruins of his heart. Heart Farm lưu ý, viết 6.000 đến 6.500 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện, pha hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước, không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phủ, phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc. Kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ đồ kịch tính không viết lan man, phần 5 giải quyết hết vấn đề và kết thúc trọn vẹn câu chuyện. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document 9 giờ 20 phút. They told no one at first. The decision felt too fragile, too new to expose to scrutiny. But 3 days later, Caleb rode into town and found Sheriff Tom outside the jailhouse. I need to know what needs doing, Caleb said. Legally. For a marriage. Tom's eyebrows rose. You're serious? Dead serious. Say, does she know what she's agreeing to? She's the one who agreed. Tom studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You'll need a license. Judge Henderson can issue one and perform the ceremony. He's in town until Friday. I'll talk to him today. Caleb, Tom said as he turned to leave, you doing this for the right reasons? I'm doing it because it's what we both want. That right enough for you? Tom's expression softened. Yeah, it is. Congratulations. Judge Henderson was a portly man with shrewd eyes and hands stained with ink. He listened to Caleb's request without interrupting, then leaned back in his chair. You understand what you're asking for? Henderson said. Marriage isn't something to enter lightly. I understand. And Miss Crow? She's agreeable to this arrangement? She is. She's of age? 20 years old. Henderson made a note. I'll need to speak with her directly. Make sure this is her choice and not coercion. When? Bring her tomorrow. If everything's in order, I can perform the ceremony Friday morning. Caleb returned to the ranch and found Lena mucking out the horse stalls. She looked up when he approached, pitchfork in hand, straw clinging to her dress. Judge wants to see you tomorrow, he said, to make sure you're entering this freely. Of course I am. He needs to hear it from you. Lena set down the pitchfork. Are you having second thoughts? No? Are you? About 100, but I'm still willing. Caleb stepped closer. We don't have to do this, Lena. If you want to find another way, There is no other way. We both know that. She wiped her hands on her apron. Besides, I meant what I said. I want to see what we could be. Even if it scares you? Especially because it scares me. The things worth doing usually are. They rode into town together the next morning. Judge Henderson received them in his temporary office above the general store. He asked Lena to sit while Caleb waited outside. Caleb paced the hallway, listening to the muffled voices through the door, trying not to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, the door opened and Lena emerged. Well? Caleb asked. Friday morning, 10 o'clock. Henderson appeared behind her. Everything appears to be in order. Miss Crow has assured me this is her free choice. The ceremony will be brief and legal. You'll need 2 witnesses. We'll find them, Caleb said. They left the judge and walked to the general store. Walter was behind the counter, weighing out flour for a customer. When he saw them, something in his expression shifted. Caleb, Miss Crow, what can I do for you? Need to ask a favor, Caleb said. Lena and I are getting married Friday. We need witnesses. The store went silent. The customer, a woman Caleb didn't recognize, turned to stare. Walter's mouth opened and closed. You're getting married? That's what I said. Well, I'll be damned. A slow smile spread across Walter's face. It'd be my honor to stand witness. And your wife? Caleb asked. We need 2. Martha would be delighted. She's been hoping you 2 would... He cleared his throat. I mean, she'll be happy to help. Word spread through town like wildfire. By sunset, everyone knew. Some congratulated them. Others whispered behind closed doors. Margaret Cole declared it scandalous. Abigail Thornton said nothing, but her silence felt like grudging acceptance. That evening, Ruth Cole appeared at the ranch carrying a bundle wrapped in muslin. Heard the news, she said when Lena answered the door. Brought you something. She unwrapped the bundle to reveal a dress. Simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Not new, but carefully preserved. It was my wedding dress, Ruth said quietly. Thought you might want something nice to wear. If it fits, it's yours. Lena touched the fabric, throat tight. I can't take this. Yes, you can. It's been sitting in a trunk for 15 years. Better it gets used than wastes away. Ruth, after everything you saved my son. Let me give you this. Please. Lena took the dress, blinking back tears. Thank you. Ruth nodded and turned to leave, then paused. He's a good man, Caleb Harlan. Treat him right. I will. And Lena? Ruth met her eyes. You're a good woman. Don't let anyone tell you different. She left before Lena could respond. That night, Lena tried on the dress in the barn loft by lamplight. It fit almost perfectly, needing only a small adjustment at the waist. She stood there in the golden light, seeing herself transformed, and wondered if she was ready for what Friday would bring. Below, in the house, Caleb sat by the fire and wondered the same thing. Friday dawned clear and cold. Caleb rose before sunrise, shaved carefully, and put on his best shirt, the one Mary had made him 5 years ago that he'd worn only twice since her death. His hands shook as he buttoned it. Lena came down from the loft wearing Ruth's dress, her hair braided and pinned with wildflowers she'd gathered the evening before. She looked young and uncertain and beautiful. You ready? Caleb asked. As I'll ever be. They rode to town side by side, not touching, both lost in their own thoughts. The morning air was crisp with autumn's promise, carrying the scent of dried grass and distant smoke. Judge Henderson's office was small and spare. Walter and Martha Briggs waited inside, Martha beaming, Walter looking proud. Tom stood near the window, official in his capacity as sheriff, making sure everything was legal. Henderson opened his Bible and began to read. The words washed over Caleb: love, honor, cherish, forsaking all others. Heavy words. Binding words. Words that meant everything and nothing depending on what lived behind them. Caleb John Harlan, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Caleb looked at Lena, saw her watching him with those steady brown eyes that had first met his over a stolen apple in his cellar. She'd survived things that would have destroyed most people, She'd stood up to a town's cruelty and chosen to stay when running would have been easier. She'd saved a child's life and refused payment. She'd agreed to marry a man she barely knew because they both needed something neither could name. "I do," he said. "Lena Marie Crow, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Lena's hands trembled slightly, but her voice was clear. "I do." Henderson produced 2 rings, simple gold bands Caleb had purchased the day before. They exchanged them, fingers clumsy with nerves. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Henderson smiled. "You may kiss the bride." Caleb hesitated. They hadn't discussed this part. Lena stepped closer, rose on her toes, and pressed her lips to his. Brief, chaste, but real. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed. "Congratulations," Henderson said, extending his hand. They signed the marriage certificate. Walter and Martha added their signatures as witnesses. Tom clapped Caleb on the shoulder. Martha hugged Lena and whispered something that made her smile. And just like that, it was done. Lena Crow became Lena Harlan, and 2 people who'd been alone became something else entirely. They walked out into the bright morning, legally bound, practically strangers, and tentatively hopeful. "Well," Lena said, "that's that." "That's that," Caleb agreed. "What do we do now?" "Go home, I suppose. Unless you want to." "Home sounds good." They rode back to the ranch, the silence between them comfortable but charged with uncertainty. Everything had changed and nothing had changed. They were married, but Lena still slept in the barn loft, and Caleb still took his meals alone more often than not. That needed to change. When they arrived, Caleb dismounted and helped Lena down. He kept hold of her hand. "I want to show you something," he said. He led her into the house, through the kitchen, to a door he usually kept closed. The bedroom. Mary's bedroom. His bedroom. The room he'd avoided for 3 years, except to sleep. "I know you've been comfortable in the loft," Caleb said, "but you're my wife now. If you're willing, this room is yours too." Lena looked around at the simple furniture, the quilt on the bed, the window overlooking the eastern pasture. "Caleb, I'm not asking you to share my bed," he said quickly. "Not unless you want to, but I'm saying you don't have to sleep in a barn anymore. This is your home now. Legally, actually. You should have a proper room. Where would you sleep?" "Loft, if you want the room. Or we could—" He paused, gathering courage. "We could figure it out together. Whatever makes you comfortable." Lena walked to the window, touched the frame. "Your wife slept here." "Yes." "Does it bother you, me being here?" Caleb moved to stand beside her. 3 years ago it would have. Today it feels right, like the room's been waiting for life to come back to it. She turned to face him. "I'll sleep here, if you don't mind sharing the space." "I don't mind." "But Caleb," she said seriously, "I need you to understand something. I said yes to this marriage because I wanted to, not because I had to. But I'm still figuring out what that means. What we mean. I know. I might be a terrible wife. I doubt that. I don't know how to be married. My parents, that wasn't what I want for us. Then we'll figure out what we do want. Together." Lena nodded slowly. "All right. Together." That night they ate supper at the table like they had dozens of times before. But afterwards, when Lena cleared the dishes, Caleb helped her wash them. When darkness fell, they moved through the house side by side, banking the fire, checking the doors, settling in for the night. Lena changed in the bedroom while Caleb gave her privacy. When he entered, she was already in bed, covers pulled to her chin, watching him with careful eyes. Caleb undressed to his undershirt and trousers and slid under the covers on the far side of the bed, leaving careful space between them. "Good night, Lena." "Good night, Caleb." They lay in the darkness, 2 people bound by law and circumstance, and something neither quite understood yet, listening to each other breathe. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. They worked the ranch together, mending fences, harvesting the last of the vegetables before frost, preparing for winter. They took meals together. They talked more, about small things at first, then larger ones. Slowly, the careful distance between them began to close. One evening in late October, a knock came at the door. Caleb opened it to find Frank Thornton standing on his porch, hat in hand. "Harlan," Thornton said stiffly. "Thornton. I heard about the marriage, came to—" He cleared his throat. "Came to say congratulations. And to apologize." Caleb crossed his arms. "That's so. I was wrong about the girl. About you. I thought, well, it doesn't matter what I thought. I was wrong, and I'm man enough to admit it." Lena appeared at Caleb's shoulder. Thornton's gaze shifted to her. "Mrs. Harlan," he said, nodding, "Ruth told me what you did for Tommy Cole, and my wife mentioned you could have refused but didn't. That took character." "Tommy needed help," Lena said simply. "Still, it was more than you owed any of us." Thornton shifted his weight. "I'm withdrawing my bid on the Crow property. Seems wrong to profit off family land, seeing as you're established here now." Caleb and Lena exchanged glances. "That's generous of you," Caleb said carefully. "It's decent. There's a difference." Thornton put his hat back on. "I'll bid you both good night." He left. Caleb closed the door and turned to find Lena staring at it. "Did that just happen?" she asked. "I think it did. Frank Thornton apologized to me. Seems like." Lena started laughing, surprised, genuine laughter that shook her shoulders and brought tears to her eyes. Caleb found himself laughing too, and suddenly they were both leaning against the door, gasping with the relief of it. When the laughter faded, Lena wiped her eyes. I didn't think any of this was possible." "What?" "This. Being married. Having people apologize instead of condemn. Feeling like I might actually belong somewhere." Caleb reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You do belong. Here. With me." Lena caught his hand, held it against her cheek. "I'm starting to believe that." That night, when they went to bed, the space between them was smaller, and when Caleb woke in the morning, he found Lena's hand resting against his shoulder, her breathing deep and even, her face peaceful in sleep. Winter came early that year. By mid-November, snow blanketed the high country, and the creek froze at the edges. Caleb and Lena worked together to prepare, stacking firewood, checking the barn roof, moving the cattle to winter pasture. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Lena spoke without looking up from the sock she was mending. "The house on my parents' land. It's still standing." Caleb set down the harness he'd been oiling. "You thinking about it?" "Sometimes. It's just sitting there, empty. Seems wasteful." "What would you want to do with it?" Lena was quiet for a long moment. "I thought maybe we could fix it up. Not to live in, but to have. For when—" She paused. "For the future." "What future?" She looked at him then, something vulnerable in her expression. "The one where maybe this ranch needs more than just the two of us. Where there might be children or hired hands or family that needs a place." Caleb's chest tightened. "You thinking about children?" "I'm thinking about possibilities. About what we might build together if we wanted to." He moved to sit beside her on the floor, took the mending from her hands. "I'd like that. The building part. Whatever shape it takes. Even though we're still figuring out what we are? Maybe that's what marriage is. Figuring it out together as you go." Lena leaned her head against his shoulder. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just learning as I go, same as you." They sat together in the firelight, and Caleb realized the silence between them had changed. It wasn't the silence of grief or loneliness anymore. It was the silence of companionship, of two people comfortable enough not to fill every moment with words. As winter deepened, something else deepened too. The careful respect between them shifted into something warmer. Touches lingered. Glances held longer. The space in the bed disappeared entirely, and some mornings Caleb woke to find Lena curled against him, her warmth a comfort he'd stopped questioning. One night in December, after a particularly brutal storm had kept them housebound for 3 days, Lena set down her book and looked at Caleb across the fire. "I need to tell you something," she said. Caleb's stomach clenched. "All right. When I agreed to marry you, I thought I was doing it mostly for practical reasons. Safety, security, a place to belong. I know. But somewhere along the way that changed. I'm not sure exactly when, but it did. She stood, moved to where he sat, and knelt in front of him. I love you, Caleb. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, or if it's too soon, or if you feel the same way, but it's true, and I'm tired of not saying it. Caleb cupped her face in his hands, seeing his own feelings reflected in her eyes. It's not too soon. And I love you too. Have for a while now, I think. Since when? Since you stood up in that church and refused to be ashamed. Since you saved Tommy Cole even though his family had been cruel to you. Since you chose to stay when leaving would have been easier. Take your pick. Lena's eyes filled with tears. I was so afraid. Of this. Of you. Of what it would mean to let myself feel something real. I know, I was too. Are you still afraid? Terrified, Caleb admitted, but I'm more afraid of wasting what we have because I'm too scared to reach for it. Lena kissed him then, soft and sure, and Caleb pulled her close, feeling the last of his careful walls crumble. They stayed there by the fire, wrapped in each other, and let themselves be vulnerable in ways neither had thought possible. That night, their marriage became real in every sense. Not because law said it should, but because they chose it. Chose each other. Chose to build something new from the broken pieces they'd both been carrying. Spring came like a promise. The snow melted, the creek ran full, and green things pushed through the earth with determined optimism. Caleb and Lena spent April working on the old Crow homestead, repairing the roof, replacing rotten boards, clearing out years of neglect. What do you want to use it for? Caleb asked one afternoon, wiping sweat from his brow. Lena surveyed the small house with satisfaction. I thought maybe we could offer it to families passing through, people who need a place to stay but can't afford the boarding house. Like you needed? Exactly like I needed. Caleb smiled. You're going to save everyone who comes through here, aren't you? Not everyone, just the ones who remind me of who I used to be. They finished the work in May. The house stood clean and ready, waiting for whoever needed it next. Lena planted wildflowers around the foundation, the same kind she'd gathered for her wedding. On a warm evening in June, they sat on the porch of their own house, not Caleb's house, not the ranch house, but theirs, and watched the sun set over land that had witnessed so much pain and healing. You ever think about how different things could have been? Lena asked. If you'd turned me away that first night? Sometimes. But I try not to dwell on what didn't happen. Where do you think I'd be? Caleb pulled her closer. Doesn't matter, you're here. And if you'd never let me stay, then I'd still be that hollow man going through motions, calling it living. You saved me just as much as I saved you. Lena laced her fingers through his. I don't think either of us did the saving. I think we just gave each other permission to heal. Maybe that's what love is. Permission to be broken until you're ready to be whole. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness gathered and stars emerged. In the barn, horses moved quietly in their stalls. In the pasture, cattle settled for the night. The land breathed around them, patient and enduring. Caleb? Lena said softly. Yeah? Thank you. For the apple, for the chance, for choosing me. Thank you for staying, for fighting, for choosing me back. She turned and kissed him, sweet and slow, and Caleb tasted wildflowers and coffee and home. Somewhere in the house behind them, a clock chimed the hour. Tomorrow they'd wake and work the land together. They'd face whatever challenges came with the strength of two people who'd chosen each other not once, but over and over, in small moments and large ones, through cruelty and kindness, through doubt and faith. Tonight, they simply sat together under the Wyoming stars, two survivors who'd found something worth surviving for, and let the quiet peace of it settle into their bones. The girl who'd arrived broken and desperate was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, claimed her space, and loved without apology. The man who'd been drowning in grief had learned to breathe again, to open his heart to possibility, to build instead of merely endure. They'd started with nothing but need and a stolen apple. They'd built a life, a home, a future that belonged to them both. And on that June evening, with the scent of sage and wildflowers drifting on the breeze, Caleb and Lena Harlan held each other close and knew, finally and completely, that they were exactly where they belonged. Part 4. Louis T. viết 8.000 đến 8.500 từ liên kết liên mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện phá hôi thoại, tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước, không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới, liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần, duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ, phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc, kể theo ngôi thứ ba, giữ đồ kịch tính không viết lan man, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang documentation giờ 56 phút. The days after Thornton's visit passed in uneasy quiet. Caleb worked the fence lines with one eye always on the road. Lena moved through her chores with a tension that hadn't been there before, jumping at distant sounds, watching the horizon. They didn't talk about what might come next. Words felt too fragile for the weight they carried. On the fourth morning, a rider came, not from town, but from the east. A boy, maybe 12, on a swayback mare that looked ready to collapse. He pulled up in the yard, breathless and wide-eyed. "Mr. Harlan," he gasped, "my pa sent me. Said you got a woman here who knows about healing." Caleb stepped out from the barn, Lena close behind. "What happened?" "My brother, he's been bit. Snake got him while he was checking the water troughs. Ma tried poulticing it, but it's not working. He's real sick, Mr. Harlan. Real sick." "Where's the doctor?" Caleb asked. "3 towns over, delivering a baby. Won't be back till tomorrow. Maybe later." The boy's voice cracked. "Pa said, he said we heard the Crow girl knows plants and such. Said maybe she could help." Lena went still. "Who's your father?" "Henry Cole, ma'am. We got the spread 5 miles south of town." Margaret Cole's brother-in-law. The family that had stood silent while Margaret tore into Lena at the church. The same family whose wife had laughed with Sarah Miller in the general store. Caleb looked at Lena, saw the conflict warring in her face. She had every reason to refuse, every right to let them face the consequences of their cruelty. "How long ago was he bit?" Lena asked quietly. 2 hours, maybe 3. His legs all swelled up. He's got fever and he keeps saying things that don't make sense. Lena's jaw tightened, then she turned to Caleb. "I need my satchel from the barn, the leather one by the grain sacks." "Lena, now please." Caleb fetched it while Lena grabbed her coat. When he returned, she was already mounting Clover. "You don't have to do this," Caleb said. "Yes, I do." "They don't deserve—" "The boy does," Lena interrupted. "Whatever his family's done, he doesn't deserve to die because of it." Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to protect her from more hurt, but he saw the steel in her eyes and knew it was pointless. "I'm coming with you." "You don't need to, but I'm coming." They rode out together, following the boy whose mare struggled to keep pace. The Cole ranch was smaller than Caleb's, buildings weathered and in need of repair. Henry Cole met them in the yard, a lean man with desperation etched into every line of his face. Behind him stood his wife, Ruth, the woman who'd laughed at Lena in the store. Ruth's face drained of color when she saw Lena dismount. "Henry," Ruth whispered, "what is she doing here?" "Saving our boy if she can," Henry said roughly. "Now get inside and shut your mouth." He led them into the house. The boy, Tommy, they learned, lay on a bed in the back room, thrashing and moaning. His right leg was swollen to twice its normal size, skin mottled purple and black. The stink of infection filled the small space. Lena knelt beside the bed and examined the wound. 2 puncture marks, red and angry, surrounded by tissue that looked ready to burst. She touched his forehead, felt the fever raging. "How long has he been like this?" she asked. "Started getting bad about an hour ago," Henry said. "Got worse fast." "Did you see the snake?" "Rattler, big one, 4 feet at least." Lena's expression didn't change, but Caleb saw her hands clench briefly. Rattlesnake venom. Serious, potentially fatal, especially in a child. "I need hot water," Lena said. "Clean cloths, whiskey, if you have it. And I need everyone out except Mr. Harlan." Ruth moved toward the door, then stopped. Can you save him?" Lena looked up, and Caleb saw something complicated pass between the 2 women. Recognition, maybe. or the acknowledgement of a debt that couldn't be spoken. I don't know, Lena said honestly, but I'm going to try. Ruth nodded and left. Henry followed, closing the door behind them. Lena opened her satchel and pulled out small cloth bundles, dried herbs, roots, things Caleb didn't recognize. She worked quickly, grinding plants between her palms, mixing them with water Ruth brought. What are you doing? Caleb asked. Yarrow and plantain to draw out poison. Echinacea for infection. Willow bark for fever. Her hands moved with practiced certainty. My mother taught me. Said every woman should know how to heal because doctors don't come when you need them. She made a poultice and packed it against the wound, then wrapped the leg in clean cloth soaked in her herbal mixture. Tommy cried out, delirious with pain and fever. Hold his shoulders, Lena instructed. Caleb did, feeling the boy's small body convulse beneath his hands. Lena worked with steady focus, changing compresses, checking his pulse, whispering things Caleb couldn't hear. Hours passed. The light through the window shifted from afternoon to evening. Tommy's breathing grew labored. His skin turned clammy. Lena's face remained calm, but Caleb saw the worry deepening in her eyes with each passing hour. She mixed new poultices, applied cool compresses to his forehead, tilted water between his cracked lips. Come on, she whispered to the boy. Fight. You have to fight. But Caleb watched her work, saw the determination in every movement, the refusal to give up even as the light faded and the boy's condition worsened. This was who she was, someone who'd choose to save a life even when that life belonged to a family that had shown her nothing but cruelty. Around dusk, Tommy's thrashing suddenly stilled. His breathing evened out. The terrible heat radiating from his skin began to ease. Lena sat back on her heels, touching his forehead again. Her shoulders sagged with relief. The fever's breaking, she said quietly. Caleb felt something unclench in his chest. You're sure? The swelling's going down. His breathing is better. The crisis has passed. She stood slowly, swaying with exhaustion. He's not out of danger yet, but he's through the worst of it. How did you know what to do? I didn't, not entirely. I just did what my mother would have done and hoped it was enough. She looked down at the sleeping boy, something soft in her expression. He'll need care for the next few days. The wound needs to be kept clean and watched for infection, but if nothing goes wrong, he should recover. Caleb stood and caught her elbow as she swayed again. When's the last time you ate? This morning. Come on, let's tell them. They found Henry and Ruth in the kitchen, sitting at the table in silence. Ruth had been crying. Henry stood when they entered, face gray with fear. He's alive, Lena said. Fever's broken. The poison is working its way out. He should recover. Ruth made a sound that was half sob, half prayer. She pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Henry's knees seemed to give way and he sat heavily, dropping his head into his hands. Thank you, he managed, voice breaking. Thank you, Miss Crow. Mrs. Harlan, Caleb corrected quietly. We were married 3 days ago. Henry looked up, surprise cutting through the relief. Married? Yes. Ruth stood slowly, wiping her eyes. She crossed to where Lena stood and stopped in front of her. For a long moment they just looked at each other, two women separated by cruelty and bridged by mercy. I'm sorry, Ruth whispered, for what I said in the store, how I treated you. I was wrong, so wrong. Lena's throat worked. Yes, you were. Can you forgive me? I don't know yet. Ask me again when I'm not so tired. Ruth nodded, understanding that was more than she deserved. Will you at least stay for supper? It's not much, but we need to get back, Caleb said, before full dark. Henry walked them out to their horses. The sun was touching the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of copper and rose. Mrs. Harlan, Henry said as Lena mounted, I know you got no reason to trust my word, but what you did today, people will hear about it, and maybe it'll change some minds. Maybe, Lena said, or maybe it won't. Either way, I hope Tommy heals well. He will, thanks to you. Henry cleared his throat. Us. And congratulations. On the marriage. Caleb's a good man. I know, Lena said simply. They rode back as darkness gathered, neither speaking for the first mile. The sky deepened to indigo, stars emerging one by one. Finally, Caleb said, "That was a brave thing you did." "I just did what needed doing." "Not everyone would have. Not after how they treated you." Lena was quiet for a long moment. "My mother used to say that kindness isn't about deserving. It's about choosing to be better than the hurt that's been done to you. I didn't understand it then. I think I'm starting to now." Sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. Didn't make her life any easier, but she was wise. They rode on through the gathering dark, and Caleb found himself thinking about choices and consequences, about the difference between justice and mercy, about this woman who'd appeared half dead in his cellar and taught him things he'd forgotten about being human. When they reached the ranch, Lena dismounted and stood for a moment, looking at the house. In the lamplight spilling from the windows, it looked warm and welcoming. Home. "Caleb?" she said softly. "Yeah?" "Thank you for coming with me, for standing beside me even when you didn't have to. I'll always stand beside you. That's what marriage means." She smiled, small and tired, but real. "I'm still getting used to that." "Me too." They cared for the horses together, then went inside. Caleb lit more lamps while Lena washed her hands and face. When she came back to the kitchen, he had bread and cheese laid out, coffee brewing. "Sit," he said. "You need to eat." She sat, and he noticed her hands were shaking slightly. The aftermath of hours of tension and fear, the weight of holding a child's life in her palms. "You did good today," Caleb said, sitting across from her. "Really good. I was terrified the whole time. What if I'd made it worse? What if he died? But he didn't. You saved him. This time. What about the next time someone needs help and I don't know what to do? Then you do the best you can, same as today. That's all anyone can ask." Lena took a bite of bread, chewed mechanically. Ruth apologized. "I heard. Part of me wanted to tell her it was too late, that sorry doesn't undo the hurt." "Why didn't you?" "Because holding on to that anger, it was making me smaller, making me into someone I don't want to be." She looked at him. "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." They finished eating in comfortable silence. When the dishes were washed and put away, they stepped out onto the porch. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like salt on black cloth. "It's strange," Lena said, leaning against the railing. "A few months ago I had nothing. Now I'm married, living on a ranch, and apparently the town healer. Life has a way of surprising you." "Is this what you expected? When you found me in your cellar?" Caleb thought about that night, the girl clutching an apple she hadn't eaten, the emptiness in her eyes that had mirrored his own. "No. I expected you to leave in the morning and I'd never see you again." "What made you let me stay?" "Honestly, I'm not sure. Something about the way you looked at me like you'd already accepted the worst and were just waiting for it to happen. Like you'd stopped fighting." "I had stopped fighting. I know. I recognized it because I'd stopped too." He turned to face her. "And then you started fighting again, and it reminded me I could too." Lena reached out and took his hand. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? Two broken people trying to figure out how to be whole. Maybe that's the only way it works. Two broken pieces that fit together." She squeezed his hand and they stood together in the darkness, listening to the night sounds, crickets, a distant coyote, the wind moving through the cottonwoods by the creek. "I should sleep," Lena said eventually. "I'm exhausted." "Go ahead. I'll bank the fire and be up soon." She nodded and went inside. Caleb stayed on the porch a while longer, thinking about the day, about Lena's courage, about the strange path that had brought them to this moment. He'd given up on the idea of happiness after Mary died. Survival had seemed like enough. But Lena had shown him the difference between surviving and living, between going through motions and actually caring about the outcome. He went inside, checked the fire, and climbed to the loft. Lena was already in her bedroll, eyes closed, breathing deep and even. Caleb settled into his own spot, far enough away to be respectful, but close enough that he could hear her breathe. "Caleb?" Her voice came soft through the darkness. "Yeah?" "I'm glad you let me stay." "Me too." "Good night." "Good night, Lena." He lay there listening to her breathe, feeling something that might have been contentment settle over him, and let himself drift toward sleep. Word spread through town like wildfire. By the next afternoon, everyone knew what Lena had done. Some praised her. Others remained skeptical, but the tone had shifted just slightly, from outright hostility to cautious respect. Walter Briggs rode out to the ranch 2 days later. He dismounted slowly, hat in his hands, looking uncomfortable. "Caleb, Mrs. Harlan." Lena, who'd been feeding chickens, straightened. "Mr. Briggs? Heard what you did for the coal boy. Henry came into town yesterday, told everyone who'd listen. Said you saved Tommy's life." "I did what I could." "Well, it was more than most would have done, especially considering—" He cleared his throat. "Anyway, I wanted to say thank you. Tommy's a good kid. Would have been a shame to lose him." "Oh, you're welcome." Walter shifted his weight, working the hat brim between his fingers. "Also wanted to say I'm sorry for the way folks have treated you, for the things that were said." He looked at Caleb. "Both of you. Wasn't right." "No," Caleb agreed. "It wasn't. Some of us are trying to make it right now. Thought you should know." He paused. "And congratulations on the marriage. Martha said to tell you she's happy for you both." "Thank you, Walter," Lena said. "Tell Martha we appreciate it." He nodded, mounted his horse, and rode away. Lena turned to Caleb, something like wonder in her expression. "Did that just happen?" "Seems like it did." "Walter Briggs apologized to me." "About time someone did." Over the next week, others came. Not many, but enough. Sarah Miller appeared with a basket of eggs and an apology that stumbled over itself, face red with shame. 2 ranchers Caleb knew casually stopped by to offer help with the upcoming harvest. Even Reverend Parker made the journey, Bible tucked under his arm, contrition written across his features. "I should have stood up for you," he told Lena, "in the church, when Mrs. Thornton was speaking. I let fear of consequence override what I knew was right. I'm deeply sorry." "It's easy to stay silent when speaking up might cost you something," Lena said. "I understand that. Understanding isn't the same as forgiveness." "No, but it's a start." Parker nodded, seeming to take comfort in that. Before he left, he pressed a small book into Lena's hands. "Thought you might appreciate this. It's a herbal guide. Might help with your healing work." After he'd gone, Lena sat on the porch steps and paged through the book, running her fingers over the detailed drawings of plants and their uses. "People are trying," she said. Caleb sat beside her. "Some people. Not all." "No, not all, but some is more than none. Is it enough?" She thought about that. "I don't know yet. Ask me in a few months." That Saturday, they rode into town together for supplies. Lena had been hesitant, but Caleb insisted they needed flour and salt, and besides, she couldn't hide forever. The streets were busy with weekend commerce. People moved between shops, loading wagons, exchanging news. When Caleb and Lena dismounted outside the general store, conversations paused, heads turned. But this time, instead of hostile stares, there were nods. A few people even smiled. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house crossed the street to greet them. "Mrs. Harlan," she said warmly, "I heard about what you did for Tommy Cole. That was Christian charity at its finest." "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. If you ever need anything, you just let me know. A healer in the community is a blessing." Inside the store, Walter greeted them with genuine friendliness. Martha was there too, and she pulled Lena aside while the men discussed grain prices. "I wanted to give you this," Martha said, pressing a small bundle into Lena's hands. "It's not much, but—" Lena unwrapped it to find a beautiful embroidered handkerchief, the corners decorated with tiny flowers. "I made it for you," Martha said, "as a wedding gift. I know the ceremony already happened, but I wanted you to have something pretty, something that says you're part of this community now." Lena's eyes stung. "Martha, it's lovely. Thank you." "You're welcome, dear. And if you ever want company or someone to talk to, my door is always open." They left the store with their supplies and several more expressions of goodwill. As they loaded the wagon, Lena looked around at the town that had once felt so hostile. "It's different now," she said. "People can surprise you," Caleb replied, "when they're given reason to." "I gave them reason before. By working hard, by not causing trouble. It didn't matter then." "No, But saving a child's life, that's the kind of thing people can't ignore. It forces them to see you as a person instead of a problem. Lena climbed onto the wagon seat. I shouldn't have had to save anyone to deserve basic decency. You're right, you shouldn't have. But we live in the world as it is, not as it should be. They rode back to the ranch in thoughtful silence. The late afternoon sun slanted across the grasslands, turning everything golden. A hawk wheeled overhead, hunting. Caleb? Lena said as they approached the ranch. Yeah? Do you think it'll last? This peace? I think people have short memories and selective ones, but I also think what you did mattered. Changed something fundamental, so maybe it will last. Or maybe we'll just take it one day at a time and deal with trouble if it comes back. That's not very reassuring. It's honest, though. She smiled despite herself. I suppose it is. That night, after supper, Lena sat at the table with Reverend Parker's herbal guide spread before her, making notes in the margins. Caleb watched her from his chair by the fire, seeing the concentration on her face, the way she chewed her bottom lip when she was thinking. What are you doing? He asked. Learning. This book has things my mother never taught me. Treatments I've never heard of. If I'm going to be the person people come to when they're hurt or sick, I should know more than what I already do. You saved Tommy with what you knew. This time. What about next time when it's something I haven't seen before? Caleb set aside the rope he'd been splicing and moved to sit across from her. You can't know everything, Lena. You're not a trained doctor. I know, but I can learn. I can be better prepared. She looked up at him. People are starting to trust me. I don't want to let them down. You won't. How can you be so sure? Because you care. That matters more than knowledge sometimes. You'll learn what you need to learn, and what you don't know. You'll figure out, or you'll be honest about your limits. Either way, people will respect that. Lena reached across the table and took his hand. When did you become so wise? I'm not wise. I just know you. And I know you won't stop until you've done everything you can. She squeezed his hand, then went back to her book. Caleb returned to his rope work, and they sat in comfortable silence, each focused on their tasks, but aware of the other's presence. This, Caleb thought, was what marriage should be. Not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but quiet evenings working side by side, building a life together one small moment at a time. 2 weeks after saving Tommy, Lena was in the garden pulling weeds when she heard horses approaching. She stood, shading her eyes, and recognized Sheriff Tom with another rider she didn't know. Caleb emerged from the barn as they rode into the yard. The stranger was a well-dressed man with silver hair and sharp eyes, carrying himself with the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Caleb, Tom said, dismounting, this is Judge Henderson. He needs to speak with you and Mrs. Harlan. Henderson swung down from his horse, dusting off his coat. Mr. Harlan, Mrs. Harlan, I apologize for the unexpected visit. What's this about? Caleb asked, voice cautious. The Crow property? I understand Mrs. Harlan is the daughter of the late William and Elizabeth Crow. Lena moved to stand beside Caleb. I am. Then we have legal matters to discuss. May we go inside? They settled around the kitchen table. Henderson pulled papers from his satchel and spread them out. When your parents died, Mrs. Harlan, their property should have gone through probate. However, no will was found and no claims were filed. The property has been sitting in legal limbo. I didn't know, Lena said. After they died, I left. I couldn't stay there. Understandable. However, that's created complications. The bank that holds the mortgage on the property has initiated foreclosure proceedings for unpaid debts. Caleb's jaw tightened. How much is owed? Henderson consulted his papers. $247. Plus interest and fees, it comes to nearly $300. It was a fortune, more than most ranchers made in a year. When's the foreclosure? Caleb asked. 3 weeks from today, the property will be auctioned to satisfy the debt, unless, Henderson looked at Lena, unless you, as the heir, choose to settle the debt and claim the property. I don't have that kind of money, Lena said quietly. Actually, you might. Henderson pulled out another document. I've been doing some research. Your father filed a homestead claim 20 years ago. Under the Homestead Act, after 5 years of continuous residence and improvement, the land becomes the property of the claimant, free and clear. The mortgage only applies to the house and outbuildings, not the land itself. Lena leaned forward. What does that mean? It means the land, approximately 160 acres, is legally yours, regardless of the mortgage. Only the structures are in jeopardy. So someone could buy the buildings, but not the land. Exactly. Which makes the property far less attractive to buyers. Most won't want buildings they can't own the land under. Henderson folded his hands. However, I've also learned that Frank Thornton has expressed interest in purchasing at auction. The name landed like a stone in still water. Caleb and Lena exchanged looks. Why would Thornton want the Crow place? Caleb asked. That land's barely worth farming. Tom, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. He doesn't want the land. He wants to eliminate any legal claim Lena might have to being a landowner in the territory. I don't understand, Lena said. If you own no property and have no family ties, Tom explained, certain people might try to claim you're a vagrant. Use that to create legal problems for you and Caleb. Henderson nodded. Sheriff Briggs contacted me because he was concerned about the legality of such claims, which is why I've come with a proposal. He pulled out a final document. This is a quitclaim deed. If you sign it, Mrs. Harlan, you formally claim the land as your inheritance under the Homestead Act. The structures may still be auctioned, but the land itself will be protected. And then? Then you decide what you want to do with it. Keep it, sell it, deed it to someone else. But it remains yours, legally and permanently. Lena looked at the paper, then at Caleb. What do you think? I think it's your land, your choice. She turned back to Henderson. What happens to the buildings if someone buys them at auction? They'd have a lease on the land for as long as the structures stand. But they couldn't build new ones without your permission. Eventually, weather and time will take the buildings, and the land reverts completely to you. And if I wanted to save the buildings? You'd need to pay off the debt before the auction. $300. Impossible. Lena picked up the pen Henderson offered and signed the quitclaim deed. Her hand shook slightly, but her signature was clear and firm. Thank you, Judge, she said. You're welcome. This will be filed with the Territorial Land Office within the week. He gathered his papers. And Mrs. Harlan, for what it's worth, I think you've handled this situation with remarkable grace. Not everyone could have. After they left, Caleb and Lena sat at the table in silence. $300, Lena said finally. I don't even know what that looks like. It's more than we have, that's for certain. The buildings, my mother's garden was behind the house. My father built that barn with his own hands. I know they're just structures, but they're all I have left of them. Caleb covered her hand with his. We'll figure something out. How? We can't make that kind of money appear in 3 weeks. He didn't have an answer. They sat in the growing darkness, holding hands across the table, facing a problem that seemed insurmountable. The next morning, Caleb rode out early, visiting neighboring ranchers. He came back at sunset empty-handed and frustrated. No one had that kind of money to lend. Times were hard all around, and people's generosity only stretched so far. Lena tried to accept it. The land was hers now, legally protected. That was something. But the thought of her childhood home being torn apart by strangers, or worse, by Thornton, sat in her stomach like a stone. 2 days before the auction, Ruth Cole appeared at the ranch carrying a wooden box. Mrs. Harlan, she said when Lena answered the door, I heard about the auction, about your family's property. News travels fast. It does in a small town. Ruth held out the box. Henry and I talked. We can't save your buildings, but we wanted to do something, so we asked around. Lena opened the box. Inside were bills and coins, not a fortune, but more money than she'd ever seen in one place. There's $83 here, Ruth said, from families around town, people who wanted to help. Lena's vision blurred. I can't accept this. Yes, you can. You saved our son. This doesn't make us even... Nothing could do that. But it's a start. Ruth, please, let us do this. Let people show you they're trying to be better. Lena took the box with trembling hands. Thank you. After Ruth left, Lena counted the money again. $83. It wasn't enough, not nearly, but it was something. She showed Caleb when he came in from the fields. People's hearts are bigger than I gave them credit for, he said. It's still not enough, though. No, but it's a start. That night, Caleb sat by the fire, running numbers in his head. They had 83 from the town. He had maybe 40 in savings. If they sold some cattle, but it was the wrong time of year, prices would be terrible, and they needed the herd for next year. He was still thinking when Lena came down from the loft. Can't sleep? She asked. Too busy doing arithmetic that doesn't add up. She sat beside him. We tried. That's what matters. Is it? Because it doesn't feel like enough. Caleb, you've already done so much. Given me a home, married me, stood beside me against the whole town. I can't ask you to bankrupt yourself trying to save buildings that are already half rotten. What if I want to? Then I'd say you're stubborn and foolish, and I love you for it, but I still won't let you do it. The words hung in the air between them. I love you, said simply, without drama, like a fact of nature. Caleb turned to look at her. What did you say? Lena's cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze. I said I love you, and I won't let you destroy yourself financially for my sake. Lena, I mean it, Caleb. You've given me everything that matters. A home, safety, partnership. The buildings are just wood and nails. They're not worth sacrificing our future. Caleb pulled her close, pressing his face against her hair. I love you too, which is why I want to fight for this. I know, but sometimes the fight isn't worth winning. They held each other in the firelight, two people who'd found something precious and were learning, slowly, how to protect it without destroying themselves in the process. The morning of the auction dawned gray and cold. Caleb and Lena rode to town together, the box of donated money in Lena's saddlebag. They knew it wouldn't be enough, but they'd decided to bid anyway, to at least make Thornton pay more than he'd planned. The auction was held outside the land office. A crowd had gathered, curious onlookers, a few potential bidders, and Frank Thornton standing near the front with his lawyer. Judge Henderson served as auctioneer. He read the legal description of the property, noted that only the structures were being sold, then opened the bidding at $50. Thornton bid immediately. 75. Caleb raised his hand. 100. Thornton's eyes narrowed. 150. 175, Caleb countered. They went back and forth, the price climbing. Caleb could feel Lena tense beside him with each bid. When they hit 200, he felt her hand on his arm. That's enough, she whispered. But Thornton went to 225. Caleb bid 250. They were almost out of money. Thornton smiled coldly. 300. The crowd murmured. That was the full debt. There was no point bidding higher. Henderson looked at Caleb. Do I hear 325? Caleb opened his mouth, ready to bid money he didn't have, when a voice rang out from the back of the crowd. $500. Everyone turned. Walter Briggs stepped forward, checkbook in hand. I bid $500 for the Crow property structures. Thornton's face went red. You can't afford? Actually, I can. And I'm bidding. Walter looked at Henderson. That's a legal bid, isn't it, Judge? It is indeed. Thornton sputtered. 550. 600, Walter said calmly. The crowd was silent now, watching this unexpected battle. Thornton looked at his lawyer, who shook his head slightly. Too much. Way too much for buildings on land you couldn't own. Going once, Henderson called. Going twice. Sold to Walter Briggs for $600. The gavel fell. Lena's knees went weak. Caleb caught her elbow. Walter made his way through the crowd to where they stood. Before you say anything, I want you to know this wasn't charity. Walter, we can't let you, Caleb started. I'm not asking you to let me do anything. I bought those buildings as an investment. I'm going to lease them to you for $1 a year until you can buy them back. When you're ready, you'll pay me what I paid, no interest. That's still charity, Lena said. No, it's insurance. You're the only healer we've got. If something happens to my family, I want to know you'll still be here to help. He held out his hand. Do we have a deal? Lena looked at Caleb, saw him nod slightly. She took Walter's hand and shook it. We have a deal. The crowd began to disperse. Some people congratulated Walter, others shook Caleb's hand. Abigail Thornton walked past without a word, her husband trailing behind her with a face like thunder. Tom caught up with them as they prepared to leave. "That was something," he said. "It was," Caleb agreed. "Thornton won't forget this." "I'm counting on it," Tom smiled. "You're getting downright ornery in your old age, Harlan. Maybe I'm just tired of people pushing around folks who can't push back." "Well, today you pushed back pretty effectively." He tipped his hat to Lena. "Mrs. Harlan, always a pleasure." They rode home in the afternoon light, processing what had just happened. "I can't believe Walter did that," Lena said. "Neither can I, but I'm grateful he did." $600. How will we ever pay him back? One day at a time, same way we do everything else. Lena was quiet for a moment. "Things are really changing, aren't they?" "They are. It's strange. A few months ago I had nothing and no one. Now I have land, a home, a husband, and people in town who care enough to help. You earned it, all of it." "Did I? Or did I just get lucky?" Caleb reined in his horse and waited for her to stop beside him. Luck is when you're in the right place at the right time. What you did, working hard, treating people with kindness even when they didn't deserve it, saving Tommy, that wasn't luck. That was character. Lena's eyes shimmered. "Thank you for believing that." "It's not belief. It's fact." They rode the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, and when they arrived, the ranch looked different somehow. Less like a place Lena was staying and more like somewhere she belonged. That night, as they settled in for sleep, Lena spoke into the darkness. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "I know we got married for practical reasons. Legal protection and all that. I remember. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being practical. For me, at least." Caleb's heart beat faster. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want this to be real. Not just legal, but real. A real marriage, with everything that means." He was quiet for a moment, making sure he understood. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Caleb crossed the space between their bedrolls and gathered her into his arms. "Then it's real. As real as anything I've ever known." They held each other in the darkness, and when they finally kissed, it wasn't the brief formal touch from their wedding, but something deeper. A promise. A choice. A beginning. And in that barn loft, with the Wyoming wind whistling through the gaps in the boards and the smell of hay and horses surrounding them, two people who'd started as strangers became something more. Husband and wife. Partners. Home. The next morning brought changes neither of them spoke about, but both acknowledged in small ways. Caleb woke first, as always, but instead of rising immediately, he stayed still, listening to Lena breathe beside him. Her hand rested on his chest, relaxed in sleep, and something in his heart settled into a rhythm it hadn't known in years. When she woke, their eyes met in the gray dawn light, and without words they understood that last night had shifted something fundamental between them. This was no longer a marriage of convenience or protection. This was a choice they'd made together, and they'd keep making it every day forward. "Morning," Lena said softly. "Morning." Caleb brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in months. You?" "Same." They lay there a moment longer, then rose to face the day. The work was the same: animals to feed, fences to check, 100 small tasks that kept a ranch running. But they moved through it differently now, more connected, their partnership deepened by intimacy and trust. Around midday, as they were repairing a section of corral fence, Lena paused and looked toward the eastern hills where her family's land lay. "I want to go see it," she said. "The homestead, now that it's really mine." Caleb set down his hammer. "Today? If that's all right, I need to see what we're working to save." They saddled horses and rode out across the grassland. The day was clear and bright, autumn sunlight turning the dried grass to gold. Hawks circled overhead, and in the distance a herd of antelope grazed. The Crow homestead sat in a shallow valley, protected from the worst winds by low hills. As they approached, Caleb saw what had drawn Lena's father to the spot: a spring-fed creek, enough timber for building, soil that might grow crops if you worked it hard enough. The house was small, single-story, with a sagging porch and broken windows. The barn listed to one side, missing half its roof. What had once been a garden was now overrun with weeds. But beneath the neglect, Caleb could see the bones of something solid. Lena dismounted and stood staring at the house. Her face was unreadable. "You all right?" Caleb asked. "I don't know. I thought coming here would hurt more." "Does it hurt?" "Some. But mostly it just feels empty. Like the people who lived here were erased, and now it's just a place." She walked to the porch, tested the steps carefully, then pushed open the front door. Caleb followed. Inside, dust covered everything. Furniture sat exactly as it had been left. A table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the cold fireplace, a few dishes still in the cupboard. On the mantel was a tintype photograph of a young couple, stiff and formal in their wedding clothes. Lena picked it up, wiping dust from the glass. "My parents. This was taken the day they married. My mother was 17. She told me once she'd never seen my father before that morning. Arranged marriage. Her family owed his family money. This was how they settled the debt." Lena set the photograph down carefully. "She never complained, not once in all the years I knew her, but she never smiled much either. Is that what you were afraid of? Ending up like her?" "Yes. Trapped in a marriage I didn't choose, with someone I didn't love, just surviving instead of living." She turned to face him. "But that's not what we are. You gave me a choice. You keep giving me choices. That's how it should be. Not for everyone, not for her." They moved through the small house room by room. In the bedroom, Lena found her mother's sewing basket and her father's pipe. In the kitchen, jars of preserves lined a shelf, their contents long since spoiled. Every object held a memory, and Caleb watched Lena touch them like she was saying goodbye. "What do you want to do with this place?" he asked. Lena looked around the dusty room. "I was thinking about what you said before, about the future, about building something. This house, it was where my parents' dreams died. I'd like it to be where other people's dreams start." "What do you mean?" "People pass through this territory all the time. Families heading west, looking for land, workers searching for jobs, people like I was, desperate and alone with nowhere to go." She gestured at the house. "What if we fixed this up and offered it to people who need it? A place to stay until they get on their feet. No payment required, just a safe roof and a chance." Caleb felt something expand in his chest. "You want to turn your family's home into a refuge?" "I want to turn it into something good, something that matters. My mother couldn't choose her life here, but maybe we can help other people choose theirs. It'll take work, money we don't have right now. I know, but Walter's giving us time, and we have hands that can work. We could start small, fix the roof, replace the windows, make it livable. The rest can come later." Caleb moved to stand beside her, looking out the broken window at the overgrown garden. "Your mother would be proud of you." "You think so?" "I know so. Taking pain and turning it into something that helps others, that takes a special kind of strength." Lena leaned against him. "Will you help me do this?" "Every step of the way." They spent the rest of the afternoon taking inventory. What could be saved, what needed replacing, what was beyond repair. By the time they rode back to the ranch, Lena had filled several pages with notes, and Caleb's mind was already working through the logistics. That evening, they sat at the kitchen table planning. Caleb sketched rough diagrams while Lena calculated costs. "If we do the work ourselves, it's mostly materials," she said. "Lumber for the roof, glass for the windows, nails and such. Maybe $50 if we're careful. I can ask around, see if anyone has materials they're not using. Sometimes people will trade labor for goods. We'd need furniture too. Beds, a stove that works, basic supplies. One thing at a time. Get it weatherproof first, then worry about furnishing." Lena chewed the end of her pencil, studying the numbers. "It's going to take months." "Good things usually do. You're not worried?" "About what?" "Taking on another project when we've barely managed to handle what we have already?" Caleb reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "Lena, we've handled everything that's come at us so far. Some of it wasn't pretty and some of it nearly broke us, but we're still here, still standing. I'm not worried about hard work." I'm worried about letting fear stop us from doing something meaningful. She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I just finally found something worth working toward that isn't just survival. They worked through the evening, making lists and plans, and when they finally climbed to the loft, Lena curled against Caleb with a contentment that felt earned rather than given. Word of their plans spread through town within days. Walter Briggs was the first to offer help, donating lumber left over from expanding his store. The Reverend Parker organized a collection of household goods, mismatched dishes, a serviceable stove, blankets, and quilts that various families contributed. Even Abigail Thornton sent a note, formal and stiff, offering the use of her husband's wagon to transport materials. I'll be damned, Caleb said when he read it. Abigail Thornton being helpful. Don't sound so shocked, Lena said. People can change when they're given reason to. She called you shameless 2 months ago, and now she's lending us a wagon. I'll take the progress. They began work on the homestead in early November, racing against winter. Caleb tackled the roof while Lena scraped and painted inside. Some days neighbors showed up to help. Henry Cole and his boys, Walter with his strong back, even Tom the sheriff on his days off. The work was hard and the days grew shorter and colder, but gradually the house came back to life. The roof stopped leaking, windows let in light instead of wind. Floors were scrubbed clean and the old furniture either repaired or replaced. One afternoon while they were working, Ruth Cole arrived with her daughters, carrying baskets of food. Thought you could use a hot meal, she said, and the girls wanted to help. The girls, 2 shy things of 8 and 10, set about sweeping while the adults took a break to eat. Ruth sat with Lena on the porch steps. This is a good thing you're doing, Ruth said, giving people a place to land when they need it. I hope it helps someone. It will. I know what it's like to need help and have nowhere to turn. Ruth was quiet for a moment. After my first baby died, I fell into a darkness I couldn't climb out of. People in town, they didn't know what to do with a grieving mother, so they just avoided me. Made it worse, being alone with all that pain. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm telling you because I want you to know what you're creating here. It's not just shelter. It's a place where people can be broken without being judged for it. That's rare. Lena felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you, Ruth, for saying that, and for everything you've done to help. It's the least I can do. You saved my son. This doesn't make us even, but it's a start toward making amends for how we treated you. After Ruth left, Lena stood on the porch looking at the house with new eyes. It wasn't just about fixing buildings. It was about creating the kind of place she'd needed when she was desperate and alone. A place that said you're worth saving, you're worth helping, your pain matters. December came with the first real snow. By then, the homestead house was habitable, warm, dry, furnished with donated goods, and ready for its first occupants. Caleb built a sign and mounted it by the road. Wayfarers rest, shelter available, no cost. Think anyone will come? Lena asked, standing beside him in the snow. Eventually, word will spread. What if they don't? What if we did all this work for nothing? Then we have a house we can use for storage or guests or whatever else we need, but someone will come. Trust me. He was right. 3 days later, a family appeared, a man, his wife, and 3 small children, traveling in a wagon that looked ready to fall apart. They were heading west to Oregon but had run out of money, and the snow had caught them unprepared. Lena welcomed them inside, showed them where everything was, and left them with instructions to stay as long as they needed. The wife cried with relief, and the husband shook Caleb's hand so hard it hurt. We'll work to pay you back, he said. I'm a good hand with repairs, and my wife can cook and clean. No payment necessary, Caleb said. Just pass the kindness along when you're able. Over the next weeks, others came. A young couple whose farm had failed, an elderly woman traveling to live with her daughter, a man recovering from illness who needed time to regain his strength. They stayed days or weeks, then moved on, and each one left the place a little better than they'd found it. A shelf repaired, a garden bed prepared for spring, a coat of paint on the fence. Christmas came quietly. Caleb and Lena spent it at their ranch, exchanging small gifts and cooking a meal too large for 2 people. In the afternoon, they rode to the homestead to check on their current guests. the young couple whose farm had failed. They found the house warm and cheerful, the couple having decorated with pine boughs and dried berries. They'd baked bread and insisted Caleb and Lena stay for coffee. "This place saved us," the wife said, a round-faced woman named Anna. "We were about to give up and go back east with our tails between our legs, but having somewhere safe to stay, to rest and think, it gave us time to make a real plan." "What will you do?" Lena asked. "My husband's going to work for the railroad come spring. We'll save our wages and try again in a year or two. Maybe find land that's more forgiving." Anna smiled. "Thanks to you, we get another chance." Riding home through the snow, Lena was quiet. "You all right?" Caleb asked. "Better than all right. I was just thinking, 6 months ago, I was the one who needed shelter and kindness. Now I'm the one providing it. It's strange how fast things can change." "You've earned it. All of it." "Have I? Or did I just get lucky you were a decent man who didn't turn me away?" "Both, maybe. But you made the choice to stay and fight instead of running. That wasn't luck. That was courage." Lena reached over and squeezed his hand. "We make a good team." "The best." Winter deepened and the ranch settled into its rhythm. Caleb and Lena worked side by side through the short days and long nights, managing livestock and maintaining buildings, and occasionally riding to the homestead to check on whoever was staying there. Their marriage deepened too, in ways neither had expected. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, the small things that made a life together. Caleb discovered Lena sang while she worked, off-key but happy. Lena learned that Caleb talked to the horses like they were people, and they seemed to respond to his gentle voice. They fought sometimes, sharp words over small things, how much grain to use, whether a fence needed replacing now or could wait. But they learned to argue without cruelty and to apologize without pride. One evening in late January, they received an unexpected visitor. Sheriff Tom rode up looking troubled. "Got news," he said when Caleb let him in. "Thought you should hear it from me." They sat at the table and Tom accepted coffee. "Frank Thornton's selling his ranch," Tom said. "Moving to Denver. Says the territory's too primitive for his tastes anymore." Caleb and Lena exchanged glances. "When?" Caleb asked. "End of the month. He's already got a buyer, some cattle outfit from Texas." "What brought this on?" Tom's expression was wry. "Near as I can tell, he got tired of being on the losing side. The auction didn't go his way. His attempts to run off Mrs. Harlan failed, and I might have made it clear that any further harassment would result in legal consequences." You threatened him?" Lena asked. "I reminded him of the law. Same thing." Tom sipped his coffee. "Anyway, I thought you'd want to know. One less enemy to worry about." After Tom left, Lena stood at the window staring out at the snow-covered landscape. "You're quiet," Caleb said. "I'm just thinking about how much has changed. When I first came here, I felt like the whole world was against me. Now our biggest adversary is leaving town. Doesn't mean everyone's on our side. No, but enough are. And that's something I never expected." Caleb moved to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You earned their respect by being decent when they weren't, by helping when you could have refused, by showing up day after day and refusing to be broken." Lena leaned back against him. "I had help. We helped each other." "Yes, we did." February brought a thaw, and with it, news that spread through town like wildfire. Tommy Cole, the boy Lena had saved from the snakebite, told everyone at school that Mrs. Harlan was a miracle worker. The story grew in the telling until people were arriving at the ranch seeking treatment for every ailment imaginable. Lena did what she could, treating coughs with honey and herbs, binding wounds, easing fevers. She was honest about her limitations and sent serious cases to the doctor 3 towns over, but her reputation as a healer solidified. "You're going to need a proper place to see people," Caleb said one evening after the 5th visitor that day had left. "Can't keep having folks troop through our kitchen." "I don't mind." "I do. You need space to work, privacy for patients, proper storage for your medicines." "What are you suggesting?" "We build an addition, small room off the side of the house, your healing room." Lena's eyes widened. "Caleb, that's too much." "It's practical. You're helping people. They should have a proper place to come to. We can't afford—" "I'll do the work myself. Lumber's cheap if you know where to look, and I suspect half the people you've helped would be willing to lend a hand." He was right. When word got out that they were building a healing room, volunteers appeared. Walter donated windows. Henry Cole and his sons helped with the framing. Even Reverend Parker spent a day mixing mortar for the foundation. By the end of March, the addition was complete. A small room with a bed for examining patients, shelves for herbs and medicines, a stove for warmth, and a separate entrance so people could come and go without disturbing the main house. Lena stood in the new space, turning slowly to take it all in. "It's perfect." "It's practical," Caleb corrected. "Perfect is a strong word." "No, it's perfect, because it means I can really help people, really make a difference." She turned to him with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for believing in me enough to build this. I didn't build it alone. The whole community helped. Because of you. Because you stood beside me when no one else would. Because you showed them I was worth defending." Caleb pulled her close. "You were always worth defending. I just helped them see it." Spring arrived in a rush of green growth and birdsong. The cattle fattened on new grass. The garden Lena planted behind the house sprouted with enthusiastic abundance. And the healing room saw a steady stream of patients, children with coughs, men with work injuries, women seeking advice about pregnancy and childbirth. Lena treated them all with gentle competence, and slowly the town came to depend on her. She was no longer the scandalous girl living in sin with a widower. She was Mrs. Harlan, the healer, respected and valued. One warm April afternoon, Lena was working in the garden when she heard horses approaching. She looked up to see Judge Henderson dismounting, looking official and slightly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Harlan," he said, removing his hat, "is your husband available?" "He's in the north pasture. I can fetch him." "Perhaps you should. This concerns you both." Caleb arrived 15 minutes later, dusty and curious. They gathered at the kitchen table. "I'll be direct," Henderson said. "I've been appointed Territorial Land Commissioner. One of my first duties is reviewing homestead claims and land grants. I've been going through the records for this district." "And?" Caleb prompted. "And I found an irregularity concerning the Crow claim. The original homestead filing was done properly, but there was a second filing that was never processed, an additional claim for water rights to the spring on the property." "What does that mean?" Lena asked. "It means your father attempted to claim not just the land, but also the water rights, which are considerably more valuable. The claim was valid but was never formally approved because he died before the paperwork was completed. Can it still be approved?" Henderson smiled slightly. "I approved it this morning. The water rights are now officially yours, Mrs. Harlan, which means anyone wanting water from that spring, including the new owners of the Thornton property, whose land borders yours, will need to negotiate with you for access." The implications sank in slowly. Lena owned not just land, but one of the most reliable water sources in the region. "How much is that worth?" Caleb asked. "Difficult to say, but in a drought year, considerably more than the land itself." After Henderson left, Lena sat in stunned silence. "I don't know what to do with this," she said finally. "What do you want to do with it?" "I don't know. It feels like too much power. Water is life out here. People need it. Then we make sure people have access to it. We charge what's fair, not what we can get away with. We help neighbors in need." Caleb took her hand. "We do what we've been doing all along. Try to be decent." You make it sound simple." "It is simple. It's just not always easy." News of the water rights spread quickly. Several ranchers approached them about agreements, and Caleb negotiated terms that were fair to everyone. They used some of the income to pay down their debt to Walter for the homestead buildings, and the rest went into savings and improvements to both properties. By summer, they were not just surviving but thriving. The ranch ran smoothly, the healing room was busy, the homestead hosted a steady stream of travelers who needed help. And Lena and Caleb's marriage had grown into something neither had imagined possible, a partnership built on mutual respect, deep affection, and shared purpose. One evening in early June, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. Lena leaned her head on Caleb's shoulder. "Do you ever think about before?" she asked. "Before I showed up in your cellar?" "Sometimes. It feels like a different life." "Do you miss it? Miss being alone and hollow and just going through motions?" Not for a second. Even though I brought complications? You brought life. The complications were worth it. Lena was quiet for a moment. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them. Caleb went very still. You're sure? He asked. Pretty sure. I've been feeling sick in the mornings and I'm late and... She looked up at him anxiously. Say something. Caleb's face broke into a smile so wide it hurt. I'm going to be a father. You're happy? Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. Are you happy? Terrified. But yes, happy. When? Late January, near as I can figure. They sat there as darkness gathered, holding each other and imagining a future that now included a child, a life they'd created together, a legacy of the love they'd built from nothing. We need to prepare, Lena said eventually. A cradle, baby clothes, figure out where the nursery will be. We have time. Not as much as you'd think. Babies require a lot. Caleb kissed the top of her head. Then we'll handle it the same way we've handled everything else, together. The summer passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Caleb built a cradle from oak, sanding it until it was smooth as glass. Lena sewed tiny clothes with Martha Briggs' help, learning stitches and techniques she'd never needed before. The community rallied around them with the generosity they'd come to expect. Ruth brought baby blankets. Walter donated a bassinet from his store. The women's auxiliary held a quilting bee and presented Lena with a beautiful quilt covered in stars. For the baby's first winter, Martha explained, so they know they're loved and welcomed. Lena cried, overwhelmed by the kindness of people who'd once scorned her. As her belly grew, Lena had to reduce her healing work. She saw only the most urgent cases and referred others to the doctor in the next town. But she continued tending the homestead visitors and working in the garden, refusing to be idle. You're going to wear yourself out, Caleb warned. I'm pregnant, not helpless. I know that, but you're also carrying our child. Let me help more. You already do everything. Then let me do a little more. They found a balance, as they always did. Caleb took on the heavier tasks while Lena focused on things that didn't require lifting or straining, and gradually they adjusted to the reality of becoming parents, their excitement growing with Lena's belly. In October, the first snow came early. Lena stood at the window watching fat flakes drift down, one hand on her swollen stomach. Baby's first snow, she said. Even if they can't see it yet. Caleb moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his hands covering hers on her belly. They can feel you watching it. That counts. You think they know we're here, that we're waiting for them? I think they know they're loved. That's what matters. As winter settled in, they prepared for the baby's arrival. The cradle sat ready beside their bed. Tiny clothes waited in careful stacks, and Lena read everything she could find about childbirth and infant care, determined to be prepared. In late December, Ruth came to stay with them, ready to help when the baby arrived. She was an experienced mother and a steady presence, which calmed Lena's growing anxiety. You're going to be fine, Ruth assured her. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. That doesn't make it less scary. No, but it means you're not alone in being scared. We've all been there. The contractions started on a cold January evening, 3 weeks before Lena's calculated due date. She was kneading bread when the first pain hit, sharp enough to make her gasp. Caleb, she called. He was there in seconds. What's wrong? I think... Another contraction cut off her words. The baby's coming. Ruth took charge immediately, getting Lena to bed, sending Caleb for hot water and clean towels, organizing everything with calm efficiency. The labor was long and difficult. Lena had helped deliver calves and foals, but experiencing birth herself was entirely different. The pain was intense, overwhelming, and seemed to go on forever. Caleb stayed with her, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, murmuring encouragement even though he looked terrified. Ruth coached her through contractions, telling her when to push and when to rest. Finally, as dawn light began filtering through the windows, a baby's cry filled the room. It's a girl, Ruth announced, wrapping the squalling infant in a blanket. A perfect, healthy girl. She placed the baby in Lena's arms. The infant was red and wrinkled and beautiful, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving indignantly at being born. "Hello?" Lena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, little one. We've been waiting for you." Caleb knelt beside the bed, staring at his daughter with wonder. "She's perfect." "She is, isn't she? What should we name her?" They discussed names for months, but never settled on one. Now, looking at her daughter's face, Lena knew. "Hope," she said. "Her name is Hope, because that's what this child represented. Hope for the future. Hope that two broken people could build something beautiful. Hope that love could grow in the harshest soil." Caleb touched his daughter's tiny hand, and she grasped his finger with surprising strength. "Hope Harlan. I like it." Ruth busied herself cleaning up, giving the new family a moment of privacy. When she returned, she found Caleb and Lena curled together on the bed, their daughter sleeping between them, all three of them exhausted and happy. "Get some rest," Ruth said softly. "I'll be right outside if you need anything." But they were already drifting off, the three of them together, a family born from desperation and choice and love. The weeks after Hope's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights and constant feeding. Lena discovered motherhood was harder than anything she'd ever done, but also more rewarding. Every smile, every sound, every small development felt like a miracle. Caleb took to fatherhood with surprising ease. He could calm Hope when she was fussy, changed diapers without complaint, and spent hours just watching her sleep, wonder on his face. "I never thought I'd have this again," he admitted one night, rocking Hope while Lena tried to rest. "After Mary died, I assumed that part of my life was over." "Are you glad it's not?" "Glad doesn't begin to cover it. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever." "We gave it to each other." Caleb looked down at their sleeping daughter. "Yes, we did." Spring came in with it, Hope's first smiles and sounds. Visitors from town came to see the baby, bringing gifts and congratulations. Even Abigail Thornton appeared, presenting a beautifully knitted blanket and admitting, somewhat stiffly, that she'd been wrong about Lena. "You've proven yourself a woman of character," Abigail said. "I regret my earlier judgment." "Thank you, Mrs. Thornton. That means a great deal." After Abigail left, Lena marveled at how much had changed. "A year ago, she was calling me shameless," she said to Caleb. "Now she's knitting blankets for our daughter." People can change when they're given reason to. You keep saying that, because it keeps being true. As Hope grew, so did the ranch and their various enterprises. The homestead continued to serve travelers. The healing room stayed busy. The ranch prospered. And slowly, steadily, they paid down debts and built savings and created a life of stability and purpose. One evening in late summer, Caleb found Lena sitting on the porch with Hope in her arms, looking toward the eastern hills where her family's land lay. "What are you thinking?" he asked, settling beside them. "About my parents. Wishing they could have met her. Wishing they could have known how things turned out. They'd be proud of you." "Would they? My mother never had choices. My father gave up when life got hard. I don't know what they'd think of who I've become. They'd think you're strong and brave and you turn pain into something beautiful." He touched Hope's soft cheek. "That you built a life worth living instead of just enduring." Lena leaned against him. "I couldn't have done it without you." "We did it together. That's the whole point." Hope stirred, making small noises, and Lena began to rock her gently. In the distance, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd turned me away that first night?" Lena asked. "Sometimes, but I try not to dwell on roads not taken." "Where do you think I'd be?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. "Does it matter? You're here. We're here. This is the life we chose. But if I had, I'd still be that hollow man going through motions, calling it living. You saved me just as much as I saved you, maybe more. I think we saved each other. That's what love does, gives you permission to be broken until you're ready to be whole." Hope began to fuss, and Lena stood to take her inside for feeding. Caleb remained on the porch, watching the last light fade from the sky, thinking about the journey that had brought them here. A girl half dead in his cellar, clutching a stolen apple. a marriage born of necessity, a community that learned to see past its prejudice, a child who represented everything good that could grow from the hardest soil. He thought his life was over when Mary died. But Lena had shown him it was just waiting to begin again. Different, yes, but no less real, no less valuable, no less worth living. Inside he could hear Lena singing to hope, the same off-key lullaby she'd sung while working the garden, while cooking supper, while moving through their life together. It was the sound of home, of family, of love that had been chosen and earned and built one day at a time. Caleb stood and went inside, closing the door on the darkness, stepping into the lamplight where his wife and daughter waited. Tomorrow would bring work and challenges and all the complications of living. But tonight they were together, safe and whole, exactly where they belonged. And that, Caleb thought as he gathered his family close, was more than enough. It was everything. The story that had begun with a desperate girl and a lonely man with a stolen apple and an act of kindness had become something neither could have imagined. Not a fairy tale with easy endings, but something better. A real life, hard-won and deeply valued, built on choice and trust, and the stubborn refusal to give up on each other. Outside, the Wyoming night stretched vast and star-filled. The land breathed its ancient rhythms, patient and enduring. And in a small ranch house at the edge of nowhere, 3 people who'd found each other against all odds settled in for the night, bound by love and hope and the promise of tomorrow. They'd started with nothing but need and courage. They'd built a home, a family, a future. And though challenges would come, because life always brings challenges, they'd face them together, the way they'd faced everything else, with honesty, with kindness, with the understanding that some things are worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, worth choosing again and again, no matter how hard the path becomes. In the end, that's what love is. Not a feeling that strikes like lightning and fades like morning mist, but a choice made daily to stand beside someone through triumph and disaster, joy and sorrow, broken and whole. Caleb and Lena had made that choice, and in making it, they'd found not just each other, but themselves. Not just survival, but a reason to thrive. Not just shelter from the storm, but a place to call home. And as the lamp burned low and the house grew quiet, as hope slept peacefully and Lena's breathing deepened into dreams, Caleb allowed himself a moment of pure gratitude for the path that had led here, for the cellar door he'd opened instead of bolting shut, for the girl who'd stayed instead of running, for every choice, every challenge, every moment that had brought them to this place. He pulled the quilt up over his family, kissed his daughter's forehead, then his wife's, and whispered the prayer that had become his nightly ritual. Thank you for this, for them, for everything. Then he closed his eyes and slept, deeply and peacefully, a man who'd finally come home.